We're live. All right. Good morning. This is a meeting of the Oregon Water Resources Commission. I just want to welcome everybody who's here, all the commissioners. It's so great to be back in person. Some logistical things. How's the sound? Can you guys back there hear what I'm saying? Okay, it's not coming. This is coming. It's not.
Sure, you don't have the mics anymore.
No, it's that, yeah, exactly.
That's it.
Bear with us, those of you attending virtually while we take a look at a technical issue.
7 minutes recording.
Somebody has to.
Yeah.
Oh, I haven't spoken with him yet. Can you hear us, Eric? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I can hear you guys. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Oh. Good to see you. But we're not hearing them.
You're not hearing her do the microphone because it would create feedback to the system. So all of you are speaking to your audience directly.
Okay. All right.
But everyone on mute can hear you just.
All right. Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. Who has control over the screen to be able to eliminate that?
That would
Is that Mindy?
be. I don't have on my screen.
Thank
All right, there we go. Thank you. Okay. So, say again, this is the meeting of the Water Resources Commission. Good morning, everyone. My name is Meg Reeves and I'm the chair of the commission. And this is our first in-person meeting in, I think it's 3 years. And and so this is a hybrid meeting, and bear with us as we work through any technical issues. A couple of things I wanted to point out from the start is that we're told that the mics in this room, for those of you who are physically present, are really sensitive. So side conversations, whispered conversations, even out, I've been told at least, even out in the audience might get picked up by the mics. So just keep that in mind as we go forward. Also, I'm saying this for the record of the meeting, and just for those who are present virtually, we have 6 commissioners present, physically present in Salem, and one, Eric Clemps, is joining us today virtually. So he'll be on the screen participating via Zoom. Let's see, that's the microphone. So yeah, please just keep side conversations during the meeting to a minimum, just because of how much the microphone will pick up. We're going to do commissioner comments tomorrow instead of today, but why don't we do just a quick introduction of for each commissioner, so people know who's who. Again, I'm Meg Reeves. I'm the chair of the commission. I live in Corvallis, and I'm here on behalf of the West Side at large. Jan, do you want to go?
Yes, I'm Jan Lee and I represent the Northwest area. I'm from Sandy.
Joe Mall from Eugene and represent based in West Central.
And I'm Julie Smitherman and I represent the Southwest region, and I live in Talent.
I'm Kathy Kahara. I live in Bend and I represent the East Side at large.
Woody Wolf. I live in Malawa, Oregon, and represent the East region.
Thank you. And Eric, would you like to introduce yourself?
Good morning, Eric Crimps, North Central Region. I live in the Meacham Creek suburb of Adams, Oregon.
All right. Okay. So let us get into the agenda for today. So many logistics. Okay, our first agenda item is project implementation. And I'm going to let the presenters take it from here.
Okay, I will start off, for the record, Doug Woodcock, Acting Director for Water Resources Department. And I want to touch a little bit on budget just first, because recall that the 21 legislative session gave us some significant resources, and then that was followed by a special session in December of 21 that piled on, if you will. And so we have been focusing a tremendous amount of effort on recruitments. I believe you've heard that at previous commission meetings. With all of the largesse that was bestowed upon the department, there were additional responsibilities and many project obligations. But we can't do that work until we fill the positions that are intended to do that work. And so we've been focusing much on the recruitments. I will tell you that the last number that I heard, we have filled 107 positions in the agency. And that is in less than a year. And that is just a staggering number. You know, when you think back, those of you who have been around for a while, previous legislative sessions, we would be doing our happy dance if we got a position or two. You know, to think that we have filled 107, and we have more to go is really something. Much of this is due to we open a position that provides an opportunity for somebody else in the agency. And so they shift over into this promotion that leaves a vacancy. And so then that gets filled. And so those numbers really add up over time. So that has been going, hats off to our HR department and all of our managers who have been able to manage all of this recruitment piece. Then we have all of the project work that we're doing. In your book, you'll note that there were some 65 rows of material of projects that we have identified. And some of these were legacy that was brought forward, things that we feel are priority and not necessarily something that came out of the legislation of 2021. But we have them all listed here. And along with the recruitments, we're making progress on a good number of them. And recall that we have been doing a lot of communication with stakeholders and legislators about this project. They're interested in, with all the resources we've been given, how are you doing with it? What are you prioritizing? What kind of progress are you making? So we've been holding regular meetings with the agricultural water user groups and conservation groups and interested legislators as well, and talking them through some of this project work. And a means that we found that was effective for this was to actually bring in our managers who are actually managing these projects. And so each of the section managers put together a 2-pager, and we've got 3 of the managers here today. We've got Rachel Levelberg, who's with you today, who is manages the surface water hydrology group. And then we have Tony Janisek, who is our dam safety engineer. He'll be up second. And then I believe Chris Bird is the last of the 3 that will be presenting today, because that's, sorry, Chris, but that's the order that they are in the booklet. And so let's stick to the booklet. So that is some past budget piece, project implementation. I think I'll save the current budget, the 23-25 work for the director's report tomorrow. And we'll go ahead and turn it over to Rachel to talk about surface water hydrology projects.
Rachel, before you get going, I just wanted to interject an apology to Doug and Nirvana for not having you introduce yourselves when the rest of us did. Doug, of course, is the acting director of the agency, and Nirvana is the ever essential executive assistant to the commission and the director's office. So my apologies I'm not,
No
I'm not
need.
in my up to speed yet on these interesting. Anyway, Rachel, please proceed.
A moment to share. Okay. Chair Reeves, members of the commission, for the record, my name is Rachel Longford. I'm the manager of the surface water section. I'm also very soft-spoken, so please let me know if I need to speak up. I'll do my best here. I am very honored to be here today to share with you the work of my really dedicated and fantastic team, surface water section. I've been fortunate enough to be the manager of this section since last July, so it's been a short time in this position, but I've been with the agency since 2013, beginning as a staff person in this section, spending some time in what is now called PCI as a technical coordinator there, and then moving to this role. Really enjoy working at the agency and I'm very excited to share with you some work. Really, you know, Doug mentioned that the managers are leading these efforts and projects, but really it's our staff that are doing all the work. So very glad to get to share some of their work. So in your binder under item A, attachment 3, you should see a 2-pager titled surface water hydrology section. I'm going to use this handout as a bit of a, I'll refer to this throughout the presentation. I'll just mention, just for context and reminder, that the surface water hydrology section sits within the technical services division that is the administrator for the division now is Annette Weaving, who's unable to be here today.
Because she's in Hawaii.
I wasn't going to have that. It's a good reason. It's a good reason. I support that reason. So before I get into the individual efforts and projects of my team, I wanted to just remind myself and all of us that all of these projects, yes, these ongoing efforts and these projects are things that we're really pushing this biennium, but they're all grounded in the work, the guiding kind of plans that we have, our strategic plan and the IWRS. Specifically from the strategic plan, there were these 4 kind of core agency functions of data and information, distribution, regulation, water right transactions, and meeting future needs. These all are functions that my team supports through various projects, and I'll try to make some of those connections as I walk through the work today. And of course, many of the actions that we use to support those functions are explicitly listed or named in the IWRS. So you'll see on the handout that there are mentions or connections to some of those IWRS actions. So I want to, for this, I wanted to start really with the current operations part of the handout first, and just ground you in what really the main activities, ongoing activities are of the surface water hydrology section. I put hydrographics first in a lot of these conversations because this is really the production of our stream flow and just, I should say, gauge data for diversions and streams. And it really is this data is fundamental to the rest of the work of our section, as well as other important functions of the agency. So our hydrographics team works very closely, daily, with our field services division to manage over 250 gauges across the state. My team of now 8, and we'll get to that in a minute here. That's an incredible number to be saying out loud. Manages around 450 measurements a month. So we're processing a significant amount of data, both for gauges and miscellaneous measurements, just measurement at various sites for regulation. every month, and it takes quite a bit of work. They're also, this is the team that's supporting, really has a lot of expertise in installing and operating gauges along with the fields. We work again hand in hand with them to make sure that we're expanding, maintaining, keeping our gauge network afloat. We also establish and maintain contracts for equipment and gauge operations. I'll get to that when I talk about ARPA funds a little bit here. Maintain best practices, support training for all staff. We have, an ever-growing number of field staff who are out taking measurements. We've been, we'll talk about a project here and really aimed at trying to improve our consistent training and support for those field staff across the state. And then close collaborations with the USGS and other state agencies on improving our engagement. That's hydrographics. Our next kind of major function is around surface water availability. Oh, and just a kind of going back to those strategic plan functions, you can certainly see hydrographics really is working on the data and information piece, but their work also is used in a number of those other functions as well, certainly informing, supporting distribution, regulation, water right transactions. Surface water availability, this is, you've probably heard of the water availability recording system. This is our IWRS program. This is the group that maintains that model and tool that works to keep it up to date, make sure no errors are present, and then also does additional work related to allocation, including supporting the issues mitigation program through some of the modeling work involved there. It's also where our drought work within the section lives, a lot of the drought conditions. I know you've heard from Ryan Andrews several times around drought. He's a fantastic presenter on that work. Next, and this is a kind of a newer function within our team, this hydrologic studies. These are reach to regional level investigations. I'll talk a bit more about that projects. And then I hesitate to call it new because we've been doing some remotely sent ET work for a while, and certainly had a water use reporting program for a while, but we have new capacity and staff now to really be supporting and expanding this work. And as I show up here, to develop reliable, accessible water use data. That's really the purpose of that team. That group also, just as a part of our core work, does a significant amount of collaboration with OSU Extension, Bureau of Reclamation Agrimet, and other federal, state, and technical partners on various projects. So that is our core work in a nutshell. Here, I want to jump now from kind of our fundamental work into these projects that we have. And I want to start with project administration. And this first bullet is probably the most, every time I have to write this down, I have to go back and count. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's just incredible. So we have, I'm including the manager position in this, but we've gone from 8 positions in this section to 17 positions. So it is a remarkable increase. We have doubled the high number of people processing stream flow data. We have basically consolidated our hydrologic studies and investigations group and added additional staff to that. And we've been working also on reclassing positions now that we have funds, so that we've wanted to have people doing work, didn't have funds to be able to move them into a position where that work was within their classification. So there were a lot of changes that I think the section had wanted to make for years, but they weren't able to make because of budget limitations. And we've been able to take advantage of this opportunity here to make some of those shifts. Last thing I'll note on administration, we have had a number of grants within our team, both for equipment and services. And it's a big load for staff to manage. So I want to acknowledge that and thank my team for all of their work. All right. I talked about the core functions of hydrographics, but I want to highlight some of the projects that team's been working on in this 21-23 biennium. We've been, two quick notes before I proceed. You'll see some initials in parentheses. I've tried to indicate where we have sections or external agencies where we are partnering on this work. Most of our work is done in collaboration with other groups, and that's a really great part of our work. I'm also indicating where we are supporting House Bill 2018. This is the water budget work that was passed in the last biennium, and quite a few of the new projects that my team's been working on this biennium are related to that. So installing gauges in study areas, these are in the pictures here. You'll see, make sure I mention the right photos here. So this is, I think the top picture is from a site called Nursery Bridge up in the Walla Walla. We've been working closely with the North Central Region staff to get equipment and gauges installed in this and other areas, as well as published a backlog of records because we were so understaffed in our hydrographics program for a long time. We have been getting provisional data out, but not finalizing and publishing the data. And that is required both for the work we're doing with the GS and for most of the modeling work that we need to do. That record needs to be final on those pages. So that's been a push for us as we've staffed up. We've also been working on improvements to our just general programs, supporting electronic field forms. And then something I'm really excited about, our hydro training team. This is a collaborative team across our agency to ensure we are having consistent and accessible training around our stream flow and data collections, mostly driven by all of the new staff that we've been adding to the agency. We've been adding new forms of data collection like our crest stage gauge program, and then also generally using the ARPA dollars, so around $1.5 million awarded for us to improve our gauge network, and using those dollars to both install some new gauges, but largely make improvements to gauges that have needed support. Move next to the surface water allocation group, surface water availability. And this, you likely heard the agency discuss wanting to update surface water availability. I'm going to talk about that briefly as a project that's on hold due to resources. However, the team has been working very hard to do work ahead of time, project management, scoping, processing stream flow data, and working on a gaps analysis that informs where our gauge network needs to expand. These are things that are important early steps in that project. So we've been busy preparing for that work, anticipating that we'll be able to move ahead hopefully in the next biennium. We've also been working with Water Rights Services Division on protest backlog reduction project. We have a role to play with water availability in many of those projects. And then finally, the drought vulnerability study, which you may have heard the policy section discuss. We have a strong technical support role in that. Pictures here, the top image is, you've probably seen Ryan present this. These are trends in stream flow from the beginning of the drought year. This was from June, early in the year, when we got a little bit of rain right before this, and then it petered out. So this was the you can see those patterns that emerged really strongly later in the year, beginning to show up here, that dry band from the southwest up through the central Oregon. And the bottom photo is from Lake Ebert this summer. Very dry picture, and something that this team has been working to support analysis work. Next, I want to talk about one of our kind of newer functions, again, within this team. This is something the department has done for a long time. We've just, again, kind of consolidated some of this work. So these are hydrologic studies. These are projects that we are really collaborating with the groundwater section in the USGS and field services on statewide recharge project. We've been busy helping to launch that project and collect data. The top picture on the right is of 3 of our wonderful staff helping to label 2,000 bottles that need to be sent out. We're going to be collecting several thousands of samples over the next through 2025, I believe. And then the other project with the GS, we're working on the Walla Walla Basin study. One of our senior hydrologists, John Marsh, who you heard from likely as well, he is leading the surface water component of that project for the department. This is also the group that really participates in the review of external technical work, especially collaborations with federal other partners. So we've been supporting work in the Klamath Deschutes, around Lake Abert, in the Willamette, and the Umatilla. So it's a review is not a, you all know, I'm sure you've been asked to do reviews. It's not a minor thing. Yeah. And then finally, even though the Harney groundwater CREP program is not really run out of my team, one of the main staff people supporting that is on my team. I'm working very closely with Jason Freed, our East Region Manager, to support him in standing up that program. And that picture in the bottom right side of this slide is grazing cattle from that region. Finally, our last and very much not least kind of newer set of projects are around evapotranspiration and water use. And the major project coming out of this team this biennium is related to House Bill 2018, and this is the development of field scale and watershed summaries of water use from irrigated ag from 1985 to 2021 using satellite-based ET. It's a massive project. We have been delayed in this work in part due to contracting issues, but my team has been fantastic in making good progress given the limitations we've had to deal with. This group is also coordinating an extension with the BOR and expansion of the AgriMet network. We've installed, I think, about 5 or 6 supported both financially and with in time hands on the boots on the ground, helping to install some of these stations around the state. We are able to invest ARPA dollars in that work as well, and are working closely to add more stations biennium. Providing training and outreach partners, Extension, Washington Ecology, Department of Water Resources, and OSU and around this technology because it is new, both to inform our own understanding as well as the public's, and making improvements to our water use reporting program as well. I'll go quickly through work on hold here. I mentioned water availability already. For that program to proceed, we really require additional investment of staff and resources. We have scoped out a statewide gauge network evaluation that we think will be critical for supporting improvements to our gauge network. This just is a workload. It is on hold mostly due to workload priority and not having our team fully staffed to choose. I still have 4 positions to fill, working quickly on that. The on the handout, I did want to note that I had had language around updating the Deschutes mitigation model and program. We now have Emily,
Okay.
thank you, who is leading the complex basin coordinator for this work, and we've been meeting with her just in the last week or so to start supporting her long-term vision and implementation there. So if I could modify my handout, I would probably take that off of the handout at this point, but it is work that will certainly require investment from our team. And then finally, I wanted to just note that through various efforts, it's been clear that surface water and other, other sections on our team there are ways we would like to improve our data accessibility to meet the needs of the public. We have one of my team members is working closely with Ben Scandella and Groundwater, Melanie Hoskinson, in this initial phase of scoping for the Oregon water data portal work with the Internet of Water. I know that work will require additional investment in the next biennium in order for it to proceed. So those were the projects on hold. I wanted to take this moment because I don't get a chance often to just publicly. Sorry. Man, it's not a hall here. I just have a fantastic team. I'm really proud of you. And I'm happy to take questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. We're proud of that team too. Yeah. Can take credit for it.
Yeah.
Commissioners, have questions? Requests, be sure to speak up if you have a question.
Because I have a question. You mentioned thank you for your presentation. And I can tell that you do have a great team and we need you and your team and all of their work. So really appreciate everything you've been doing. You mentioned that there were still 4 positions to be filled. Where was that? In what area was that?
Yeah. So I am currently hiring one senior position in the basin studies and investigations team, and that I'm in the, hopefully, fingers crossed, last phase of the interview process. So as you probably heard, my apologies, Chair Reeves, thank you for your question.
Yeah.
I'm in the process of hopefully finishing up that hiring process. Though, as you may have heard from other managers, it's a difficult hiring market. I've certainly faced challenges with people. I've had a couple opportunities to offer people jobs and they've already found another job, or life happens and they need to stay in Florida or whatever it is. So I'm continuing to make progress there. The other open positions are the result of, so one other change, I did just fill the senior surface water availability position that's on this handout indicated as unfilled, but that was an internal shuffle. And so I now have another open, which is great. I'm excited for my team. And I also now have another open position. So that is yours. Both of those open positions are in the WRS team. And then I have an additional hydrographer position that I'm working with HR on some new class of shoes on. And that's just required additional touches from DAS. And so it's been slowed down into like.
I can definitely relate to the new hiring and interviews and just the difficulty and challenges around that. So keep going for it. Keep trying, because the right person is out there.
I'm doing my best to learn how to make it as good as I can.
Other questions?
Not a question, but a comment. And you've taken on a heck of a workload and you're doing a great job of getting, boots on the ground and going for it. This, coming from previously from reclamation, we really did rely on the state hydrographers and what, to help make our decisions, and this work is very vitally important. So thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I'm sure any of my team members hearing that will be really feel very supportive. Thank you.
Yeah, I would add that it's really thrilling to see this amount of effort, this amount of expertise within the agency. It's just fantastic. And I really applaud your efforts and everything your team is doing. I had a couple of just questions about what I was noting as you went through, if I can go ahead and ask some of them. Someone from the Habitat Division, the new Habitat Division, I know the FW, spoke to us at OWEB about various projects, and one of them was gauging station work that they're doing, and you mentioned collaborating on that.
Yeah.
That is, and USGS, I guess, as
Yeah.
well, and their focus is, they're trying to get gauges in place where they think they need them for
Yes.
fish purposes, I
Yes.
assume, right?
Yeah.
So that's a collaboration, because there's a lot of collaboration showing up on these screens, which I think is great. And also the data portal, is that the project that DEQ is leading right now?
Yes.
And that's the Internet of Water, is that what, is that something different?
Chair Reeves, yeah, the contractor that the data portal team hired to guide them in this initial phase is the Internet of Water organization.
Oh, okay, I see. I never heard that name before. It's a great name.
It's from Duke,
Okay.
run out of Duke, and they've got I encourage you to check out their website.
Yeah, I will.
Some Interesting concepts and ideas, some great people thinking about
Yeah.
working.
One other question was, improvements, one of your bullets was about improvements to the water use reporting program.
Yeah,
And I'm just curious what sorts of things you're doing there.
yeah, so right now that is one of the positions I filled a little later on, and so we wonderful person in that position now, Wayne Skladel. He just sent out our first mailing. We have to send out an annual mailing around water use reporting. And he has indicated a number or identified a number of efficiencies that he would like to make just in our own handling and reporting out of that data. There are also I think it was 2021, the agency in response to the legislature sent a report on water use. It was, I think it was literally called the water use report to the legislature that listed out a number of improvements for the water use reporting program in there, mostly around database structure. There was a far longer and broader group of improvements around water use data generally in that report, but the water use reporting program of that. So mostly internal reporting, kind of visualization type consolidation of information where it makes sense.
Okay. Thank you. I'm told that, yeah, now I can see, Commissioner Quips has his hand up too. Eric, do you want to go ahead?
Good morning. Thank you, Chair Reeves. Yeah, I might have missed it, but I was curious, what is the schedule for the completing the gap analysis and some of the products that you think might come out of that? I see a few there. I think it could inform a lot of future work. And I also would be interested to see kind of a reporting of the different periods of record for the various gauges we have in the state. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Reeves and Commissioner Quemps. I will look at I'll look here. I think I hear that. So to your first question about the timeline for the gaps analysis, Ryan Andrews has been leading that work. He has been focused on an initial phase of that work called the disturbance index, and is then working, we're hoping by the end of the biennium to get to at least an initial version of that gaps analysis. This feeds directly though into one of the projects that I mentioned that was on hold, and that was the statewide gauge network evaluation. And I think Commissioner Quemps, that's where that work around to your second point of discussing and pointing out where those gaps are in our periods of record and really reckoning with what additional changes we need to make with our gauge network will happen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have any other questions, comments from commissioners? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Well done. Who's next?
Next up is Tony Janicek.
It's going to take me a minute to join Zoom. Let me pull up my presentation.
Recording in progress.
It is muted. It is muted. Got it. Apologies.
We're all figuring this out.
Yeah. Okay. So Chair Reeves, members of the commission, my name is Tony Janicek. I am the state engineer for water resources and the dam safety program manager. My presentation today will cover the priorities for the dam safety program for this biennium. I would like to point out that item A, attachment 4, contains the 2-pager that Doug described. My presentation will generally follow the first page, so if you want to follow along in it, you can. I would like to note that on the first page of the 2-pager, I have indicated the integrated water resource strategy recommended action next to the priority. The second page of the 2-pager I will not be covering, but I do want to point out that it contains a table of timelines for which the work that I will be describing will be completed. So I'll start with a brief overview of the dam safety program. There are 944 state regulated dams throughout Oregon. This number varies from year to year, depending on if dams are built or dams are removed. The program only regulates dams that are at least 9.2, store at least 9.2 acre feet and are at least 10 feet in height. All dams that the program regulates are assigned a hazard rating. The hazard rating is based on the consequences that will result if a dam fails. We have 3 hazard ratings: high, significant, and low. For a high hazard dam, we expect loss of life if the dam fails. For a significant hazard dam, we don't expect loss of life, but we expect extensive property damage. For a low hazard dam, we do not expect either loss of life or property damage. The image at the right shows the distribution of state regulated dams throughout Oregon. The high hazards are indicated by a red dot, the significant by yellow, and low hazard by a black dot. So on to our priorities. A major priority for the program has been recruiting. The 2021 Oregon legislature provided 2 permanent professional engineer 1 positions. That brings our total staff to 4 professional engineers and 1 engineer in training. This is the most staff that our program has had since the late 1970s. Up until a few years ago, there was only 2 engineers, and before 2016, there was only 1 engineer. So our staff has increased quite a bit over the last few years. So once we got through the challenges of recruiting, we actually had quite a difficult time hiring engineers. There's with any, STEM field, there's a huge demand. And so it took quite a while, but we did actually hire 2 great engineers. And so once we got through the challenges of that, we've been spending a lot of time on training. And so the image at the bottom left shows training of our new staff during a dam inspection. So with this added staff, we have also been able to get to work that previously was done infrequently due to a lack of resources. Examples of this work can be seen in the photos to the right. The top photo shows dam safety staff surveying a dam. The bottom photo shows dam safety staff inspecting a dam during construction. A key function of the dam safety program are dam inspections. These inspections identify and document safety-related issues. Specifically, we're checking for signs that dams need maintenance or corrective actions to prevent the dam from failing. Following inspections, we communicate these results to dam owners through an inspection letter. In the letter, we also provide recommendations to the owner for maintenance, as well as any required actions. Approximately 250 to 300 dam inspections are due each year. Dam safety program staff, as well as field services division staff, are responsible for these inspections. Dam safety staff inspects all high hazard dams and some significant hazard dams. The field staff inspects low hazard dams and some significant hazard dams. Throughout the year, we also provide inspection training and support to field staff for dam inspections and inspection letter writing. The photo to the right shows dam safety staff training field services staff during a dam inspection. Another priority area are contracts and grants. The 2021 Oregon legislature provided the program with $1 million in general fund and $4 million in ARPA funds. The $1 million in general fund could be used for any of our state regulated dams. However, we have focused that money on high hazard dams that have an identified safety issue. The $4 million in ARPA funds are only to be used for publicly owned water supply dams. Since the start of the biennium, we have spent a significant amount of time developing requests for proposals, reviewing proposals, and then awarding and managing contracts. We also have 2 FEMA grants, the National Dam Safety Program grant, which provides just general support in the form of funding, which supports our program. And the other is the High Hazard Potential Dam Grant, which provides funding for certain high hazard dams that meet eligibility requirements. The HHPD grant program has been in place since 2019. We have been awarded funding each year since the beginning. Funding has ranged from $184,000 to $1.27 million. And I would also like to point out that so each year funding is awarded, and that funding is spread out over 3 years. So we're still actually working on projects from 2019. This table shows a list of projects that are currently funded by the $1 million in general fund and the HHPD grant funds. We combined these 2 sources of funding so that we could maximize the number of projects that we could complete. All of these projects either work to address a critical safety need of a high hazard dam, or they provide funding for analysis work that applies to a number of dams. Another area of focus this biennium has been design reviews. Dam safety program staff reviews and approves designs for all new dams and for modifications to existing dams for dams that meet the statutory requirements for regulation. We typically do 5 to 8 reviews per year. Each review can take 2 weeks to 3 months, depending on the hazard rating. So far this biennium, we have done 8 reviews, and we are aware of a few more that will be coming in early next year. The photos on this slide show 2 different projects that went through our review and approval process. Both of these are for a raise to the dam height. The bottom one is for a high hazard dam, and the one to the right is for a significant hazard dam, both in Wheeler County. Another area of focus has been emergency planning. All high hazard dams are required to have an emergency action plan or an EAP. An EAP is a document that provides steps to be taken in an emergency. They also contain an inundation map, which shows the area downstream of the dam that would be flooded if the dam were to fail. And an example of an inundation map is shown on the slide at the right. All high hazard dam owners are required to update and exercise their EAPs periodically. EAP exercises consist of going through the steps in the EAP to ensure that all responsible parties understand their role during an emergency. This biennium, we have been working with OEM and local emergency managers on setting schedules for these exercises. And we've also been working with dam owners on completing these exercises. The final area of focus this biennium has just been general program administration. The dam safety program maintains a database that contains information on all of our dams. The database is publicly available, and a screenshot of the database is at the bottom of the slide. Annually, we send out a dam safety fee. This fee partially supports our program. Although the bulk of the work related to the fee is done by Administrative Services Division staff, dam safety staff does provide support in the form of owner contact verification and responding to any dam owner questions related to the fee. Throughout the biennium, we respond to public records requests. Depending on the nature of these requests, these can be time consuming. And finally, we maintain files on all of our 944 dams. We are in the process of having all of these files scanned so that we can move to an electronic filing system, which we feel is going to make us more efficient. The added benefit of that is that once files are all scanned, we can move them offsite, which creates additional office space for staff. So due to the priorities that I mentioned, as well as a lack of resources, we've had to put some important work on hold. One area of that work are engineering analyses. Although I mentioned we do have contract funds for this work, that funding only applies to high hazard dams with an identified safety need and public water supply dams. There are many other dams that don't fit into these categories that need analysis work. Typically in the past, prior to this biennium, we did a lot of that work in-house within the program. 2 examples of that work can be seen on the images to the right. Both of these are inundation maps. As I mentioned, these show what happens when a dam fails. These maps are produced from an inundation analysis, a dam breach inundation analysis. And the maps are used, as I mentioned, in EAPs. They can also be used as a basis for evacuation maps. But more importantly, these maps are also used to reassess dam hazard ratings, which is another area of work we've had to put on hold. So over time, a dam's hazard rating can change due to development downstream. So it's important to periodically recheck the hazard rating to ensure that life, property, and infrastructure are being protected. So when a dam is identified that needs an analysis, we do the dam breach inundation analysis. We produce a map, and then the map allows us to determine if the current hazard rating is appropriate. And so both of these examples are for dams that were originally rated low hazard. So if they failed, we weren't expecting property damage or loss of life. However, the analysis showed in both cases that these dams were actually high hazard dams. We expect to get back to this important work next biennium. Another area that we've had to put on hold are assessing conduit conditions. All dams have a conduit through them that allows water to be released. Many dams in Oregon, these conduits are past their design life and need repair. As an example of this, the photo at the bottom left shows the inside view of the conduit through Upper Big Creek Dam owned by the city of Newport. You can clearly see the corrosion as indicated by the brown discoloring on the bottom half of the pipe. You probably can't see it from where you are, but if you look closely at the photo, you can actually see that the pipe is broken and you can see the soil at the very bottom of the picture. This is a very serious safety issue. In this case, we're currently working with the city of Newport on addressing this issue, but this just provides an example of what these conduits and dams could look like. And so next biennium, we do plan on getting back to this work of identifying and addressing these issues with conduits. The final area that we've had to put on hold are levee assessments. We do not have a good idea of how many levees there are in Oregon, and we don't know what these levees are protecting. So as resources allow, we will compile a list of these levees and assess their risk to life, property, and infrastructure. So with that, I would thank you for your time, and we'll turn it over to you for any questions.
Thank you, Tony. That's a great presentation. Question? Yes.
Yeah, Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife was authorized by the legislature to fund fish passage at existing dams, some portion of the cost. And I'm wondering if in your design and review analysis, if you look at the fish passage situation, or if you're aware if there are some current projects that are ongoing at existing dams.
Yes, Chair Reeves and Commissioner Lee, yes, I am aware that there are some existing ones. Our role with is we don't really have much of a role in fish passage unless it somehow affects the safety of the dam. Mostly fish passage is around the side of the dam. However, whenever a design comes in where fish passage is required, or if for some reason we think it might be required, we always coordinate with ODFW on this. I'm aware of at least one project that's underway now for a dam where they're actually building a fish ladder that wasn't, or a better functioning fish ladder than what they have now.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Yes, Commissioner.
I would just like to echo, I wrote down the same question, Jan. I certainly want to encourage, and maybe it's a parking lot item for the IWRS update or strategic planning, but that's exactly the kind of cross-agency collaboration I think would really be valuable. And I think a lot of fun too. And I think getting the fish folks and dam folks together more often is really productive. Thanks again, Tony. First, want to acknowledge that outside my role as a commissioner, I made a records request in my other role, McKenzie River Trust, for some dam information for a couple dams on the Central Coast, and the request was fulfilled within less than 24 hours, which both stunned, surprised, and wanted to make sure that this wasn't just because I was a commissioner, but learned seriously, but the practice is that as long as I think it can be done within 30 minutes or less, really try. And so I laud that. I think that goes a long way to building public trust, which is something in the water world is more precious than gold right now. So thank you again on that. I'm curious about two things, the levee piece especially. In the Willamette Valley, the record of levees being built in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, and now reaching their engineering lifespan starting to fail has raised this acknowledgement that A, we don't know where they all are, B, we don't know whose they are because of that. And it's always been a Corps of Engineers sort of discussion, and I'm curious, where's the intersection on that with the Corps? Is that something that you all are doing in parallel? Is there a joint effort to assess the presence in those levees?
Sure. Chair Reeves, Commissioner Mall. First of all, thank you for your comments on the public record request. It's a goal of the dam safety program to be prompt and provide excellent customer service. I agree with you that it goes a long way with building confidence. As to your levy question, that is a great question. The dam safety program right now has limited authority over levees. Essentially what it comes down to is that we, if we're asked by a levee owner to come out and inspect, and resources allow, we'll come out and inspect their levee and essentially provide them with an inspection letter like we would a dam. However, the department recognizes the issue that you bring up, that there's a lot of levees out there that we don't know where they are, we don't know what they're protecting. So in the past year or so, I, as well as my predecessor, Keith Mills, have been meeting with the Corps on this issue. And what we have found out is that the Corps they don't actually regulate any levies, right? The Corps has Corps-sponsored levies, which means they're part of their program. They're available for support and funding if needed. The Corps does maintain a database of levies. There's about a little over 200 in their database, and only about half of those do they sponsor. And the Corps estimates that what they have in their database is only about 10% of what's out there. So this is a big issue. And so to be fair, a lot of these are probably just agricultural levies protecting agricultural land and wouldn't actually affect cause property damage or loss of life. However, there are levees out there that we don't know about that people believe are protecting them that they may not be. So,
thank you. I want to encourage more work there too. Another opportunity for great collaborations where there is the ability in some of these systems to remove levees that aren't functioning anymore or compensate landowners who are losing it, because from a water table, from a groundwater recharge perspective, it opened up a lot of really creative space. Can I have two more questions? This is a question and some encouragement as well. You look at the Big Creek Dam, and so if I'm a dam owner and we do an inspection and find that, oh, wow, I have a real problem, my guess, the default is that it's on me and I need to take care of it. We have a grant program now that I think would qualify, and how can you guys link up the landowner with that grant program, and does that culturally, is that beginning to happen more and more where people are making that connection? And B, I guess my encouragement is that's another place where you've heard me say it before. I feel like more flexibility within the grant program to really prioritize, not be to lean away a little bit from an equitable grant program to this is a high priority that is in public interest. We need to find ways to fund it. And maybe a question in there, is that something that you're seeing? Are landowners recognizing the department as more than the regulatory agency is actually having resources to help them resolve an issue?
that's a great question. So when we identify these issues and let the owner know about them, one of the things that we always do is try to help them find a source of funding. However, there's very limited funding out there for these. As I mentioned, the high hazard potential dam grant is only for high hazard dams that only meet a very certain limited criteria. So of our 944 dams, there's 76 high hazard dams, and only 20 of those are eligible for that funding. So there's not a lot of sources for funding out there. Recently, I found out from the Corps that they, this past year, they've started a new program. I believe it's called the Core Water Infrastructure Program. They provide funding for new dams and rehabilitations to dams, but their minimum amount that they'll fund, I believe, is somewhere around $5 million. So that doesn't do much for the dams that we have, because a lot of the dams, these projects we're looking at are under that. So to answer your question, yes, we try to help them with sources of funding. There's just not a lot out there.
Last question, real techie. I'm not an engineer at all, but we're running into some questions around with drought, with changes in annual pools, the question of instability, because things aren't as saturated as they would normally be, as they were designed to be. Is that becoming a broad statewide issue? Are you seeing that dams starting to show weakness because they aren't getting saturated because pool levels are consistently lower and lower, or is that just hearsay?
Well, so from a safety issue, there's not really a stability issue with that. The dams have problems in that respect if the water level drops rapidly. So if there was a rapid drawdown, like they just opened up the outlet conduit and released all the water from the dam, that could cause a stability issue. But you know, prolonged periods of dryness isn't going to do that.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Quims? Yes, I see you have your hand up. Please.
Good morning. Thank you. Thanks for the report. I noticed yesterday on the USA Today website, they had a headline that dams are failing and more are at risk from climate change and storms. So I think this is timely and the state can manage this information. So hopefully it's not, you know, a bunch of hyperbole and people overreacting, but I think it's great information to communicate that the program is regularly inspecting dams and monitoring this. On the levees, I had a question. It sounds like you're thinking about trying to get to levee assessments in the future. And again, along with Commissioner Mall, I think it's a great opportunity to share information with, if that information is publicly available, project proponents could use it to help with their grant proposal development. I think the Oregon Watershed Enhancement Board could use it in terms of looking where there might be opportunities to either remove or set back levees and, improve water storage, reduce water energy, improving flood risk management. So just a couple of ideas there. Thank you.
Chair Reeves, Commissioner Wemps, thank you for the comments and the question. Yes, I agree with you 100% on the levy issue. Right now, we do have a policy option package that we are proposing for the governor's recommended budget on this very issue of developing a levy database. And as I mentioned, any of our work related to levies would only be as resources allow, just because we just don't have the resources with all our responsibilities for dams. So if that does go through, we will develop a levy database that will be publicly available, like our dam safety database.
Tony, one more question. I think you mentioned training field services staff. Is that an effort to kind of have more more inspection kind opportunity when the field staff is out doing other things, basically, or?
Chair Reeves, yes, that's a good question that needs clarification. So field staff has always participated in dam safety inspections. Just because, I mean, with 944 dams, around 300 due each year, when it was just one engineer, he couldn't do all those himself. So yes, we do train them, but having field staff trained with dam safety inspection also helps with emergency response, because they're typically the ones that are closest to these dams. So if we get a call that there's an urgent safety issue, field staff can respond much quicker than we can from Salem.
Great, thank you. Okay, I think that's it on this topic. Thank you so much. I think that's a great presentation.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, could I ask one more quick question?
Commissioner Quinn.
Thank you. This is a little operational, probably too detailed, but it strikes me that, a lot of basins over the years have been increasing their collection of LiDAR data as that becomes more cost effective. And it seems like that would be a good place to do a lot of kind of at least core screening on identifying levees across the state. And that may be something you guys have already considered, but just an idea. Thanks.
Yes, Chair Reeves and Commissioner Flemps, I agree with that. That is a great idea. So Dogami actually does collect LiDAR data. The coverage for the state is definitely not complete. They initially had done a survey of levees using that LiDAR data for the Willamette Valley and some of the coast regions. The analysis they did was strictly through GIS software. So it was essentially a program that identifies levee-like features. So while the data is useful, it still needs to be gone through by an engineer, and it right now it's incomplete for the state.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, shall we transition over to Chris Bird and the well construction program?
Good morning, Commissioner, Chair Reeves and Commissioners. My name is Chris Bird. I'm the manager of the well construction section here at the department. I will share my screen. Are you able to see my screen? Oh, sorry. There we go. All right, are you able to see my screen?
Yes.
So I'm here to talk to you today about the well construction programs, projects and priorities for the 21-23 biennium. And you'll note during my presentation that there's a theme. That is House Bill 2145 from the 21 session. And that bill was an effort to modernize the well construction program. And this bill substantially changed our program and is still in the process of changing it. And so you'll notice that throughout our projects that we're going to be talking about. And just a reminder, this is item A, attachment 5 in the handouts. So as far as the core functions for the section, the section works to ensure that wells are constructed, maintained, and abandoned on a statewide basis in a manner that is protective of the resource. We also conduct well inspections. We give continuing education training. We train our staff to review well reports. And we license drillers, administer exams, handle customer service calls, issue ID labels, and we also process requests for special standards when the regular well construction standards can't be met. In regards to compliance, our goal is ultimately voluntary compliance. We have a very good record of achieving that compliance with the drilling industry. When that can't be met, unfortunately, we have to go to enforcement, but really the goal is, and our record shows that we have a good record of voluntary compliance. The special standard program is in place when drillers are not able to meet the minimum construction standards. The person in that position is one who interprets statutes and rules for staff and the field for drillers when they have questions about standards, to make sure that either they're being met, or if they can't be met, that they have an avenue to ask for a variance. We also deliver training and continuing education to the drillers in regard to rules and statutes, so that they can maintain their license and that they're up to speed on the rules and statutes. And then again, we review water right applications when they're submitted for groundwater rights to make sure that wells associated with those applications meet minimum standards. The technical well report review program, I'll be talking about later, but that's a new piece of our program brought about by House Bill 2145. We coordinate the review of 100% of the well reports submitted on a yearly basis to make sure that the wells are constructed in a manner that meets standards, but that they're also protective of the resource. We also develop and deliver training to staff to review the reports, to make sure that the reviews are done consistently on a statewide basis. For instance, to make sure that someone who's reviewing a well report in Pendleton is reviewing it the same way as someone in Medford. We also review the deficiencies that we note to look for training needs, to see if drillers, there may be misunderstandings in some of the rules. If we see consistent deficiencies, then we know we may need to develop training to drillers to make sure that they know what the standards are. And finally, we track the resolution of deficiencies. So when we do have reviews, we'll find deficiencies. We work with the drillers to resolve those, and we track those to make sure that that actually happens. The licensing program is where we proctor and give the examinations on a quarterly basis. We'll also do it on an as-needed basis if a circumstance arises for specific drillers, if they need an exam out of date, for example. And then we issue licenses to qualified applicants. We also coordinate and support the Continuing Education Committee, and then update the database to review those credits to make sure that drillers know if they have enough credits to renew their licenses, because credits are required to renew every year. The geotechnical hole program is responsible for reviewing the geotechnical hole reports that come into the office. We get approximately 5,000 a year, and also to invoice the responsible parties for those geotechnical holes. And also that staff person is responsible for working with the well report reviewers to make sure that any amendments to well reports that are noted during well report reviews are addressed and fixed in our database. The Well ID program is the person that handles customer service. So we get a lot of calls every year, as you can imagine, from people looking for well reports, questions about wells and that kind of thing. And they're kind of our point of contact, so they can direct calls to other staff in the section. They also coordinate the Well ID program so that drillers can get labels for wells that they're drilling. And they also work with landowners and realtors to help assign labels during property transfers, because during property transfers, landowners are required to put labels on wells that don't have them already. And then we also coordinate and publish the OWRD Well Owners Handbook in that position. I should note here, the photo there to the right, the blue pipe, that's a geotechnical hole. It's a planometer. And the bottom photo is just a standard well that shows a well ID label on the well. As far as administration, we were lucky enough in House Bill 2145 to get a new position, the NRS 4 there. That person is in charge of the technical well report review program. And like I mentioned, we get approximately 5,000 a year. The reviews began in July of 2022. So we hired that position in January of 2022 to get the program up to speed and to get started prior to the implementation. The person that was successful for that was my NRS 3 there, the middle position, the Well Construction Program Coordinator. So we have musical chairs. I had to hire somebody to replace that person. So I was successful in hiring that position in March of 2022. So we didn't have too long a time the position vacant, because that's the individual that handles special standard calls, and the person's on the phone constantly. House Bill 2145 also allowed us to move the exempt use program coordinator position into a new role, because the exempt use program modified who was paying for the exempt use fee, registration fee, and submitting the map for wells that are constructed for an exempt use. So we moved that exempt use program coordinator to a well program specialist position, who's now supporting our technical well report review resolution process, as well as inspecting wells and handling other roles. So 2145, like I mentioned, moved the exempt use fee from the landowner, which would have been invoiced within 30 days of us receiving the well report, to the driller. So now that we didn't need to invoice these individuals anymore, the landowners, we had to modify our IT systems, because drillers are required to pay the exempt use fee at the time they submit a well report. And upwards of 85%, or maybe even more now, of drillers submit the well reports electronically. So we had to give them the ability to pay that fee and submit the map electronically at the time they submitted that report. And that required IT work to do that. So we started that process in approximately July of 21, and that changeover happened in January of 2022. And we were able to complete that process on time, so that drillers were able to accomplish that task in the January deadline. And the same with the map, that was the same time frame. In addition to that, since the drillers were paying this fee electronically now, and we didn't need to invoice landowners for every well, every exempt use well, we moved the exempt use fee collection portion from the well construction section to the fiscal section. There are some drillers that do not pay the fee, they submit paper forms. And so they will invoice those individuals as soon as we get the well report, so that they have to submit the map and the fee. But that again allowed us to move that exempt use program coordinator in our section to a well program specialist to support the technical well report review program. And then finally, we had to communicate these changes. These were major changes to the drilling industry, to where they would be responsible for the fee and the map instead of the landowner. So we had a robust communication plan that we provided, that we initiated in July of 21. And in fact, that communication plan is still moving forward, but the piece regarding the exempt use was finished in January of 2022. We wanted to make sure that it was not a surprise to anybody about these changes, and that when it happened, we would have a smooth transition, and we were able to accomplish it. As far as the exempt use program rulemaking, you can imagine it was quite a change in statute to the program, which also includes rulemaking. Our rulemaking is going to be started next month in December of 2022. House Bill 2145 has a lot of changes, not only in the exempt use program, but throughout our entire program. And so we're going to tackle that beginning next month. And we're the plan is to get it through the RAC and in front of the commission so that we can have those rules adopted prior and in place prior to July of next year, which is when another piece 2145 kicks in. The exempt use invoice process, like I mentioned, switched to the driller in January 2022. But drillers were submitting well reports up until the end of December in 21. And so we had to complete the invoice process for those folks that were still needing to be invoiced prior to the switchover. That work, and like I said, we moved the invoicing to fiscal in January 2022. So we had to wrap up the invoicing to the landowners for those jobs that came in prior to the changeover. So we did that beginning in January, and we completed that in approximately July of 2022. So that now the only invoicing going on is to licensed drillers. In addition to the exempt use program changes with the IT folks, there was also, we were fortunate enough to get a start card fee increase in the bill. It went from $225 to $350, and that kicked in January of 2022. But like I said, we have 85% or more of drillers submitting their start cards online, which means we had to increase that fee online. And so we were able to do that, and that was in place again by the January 22 deadline. Another change that we had to do as far as IT was we had to develop a process, a IT process for the reviewing of the 100% of the well reports that are submitted. That, like I mentioned earlier, kicked in July of 2022. And that really is a big deal because, you know, like I mentioned, we had 5,000 a year, approximately, well reports that come in the door. And 100% of those have to be reviewed, and we have to notify the drillers that their reports have been reviewed. And so we had to develop a system that would allow us to do that, track the deficiencies, track the reviews, and notify drillers that the reviews have been completed within 120 days. And so we started working on that in approximately January of 22. And that tracking and IT program and application were in place by July 22, which on time, and we were able to begin the review and tracking of those on time in the beginning of July. We also had to develop the procedures on how these reviews were going to take place for staff. The reviews are done by field staff, field inspectors, as well as some of the folks in the well construction section. So we had to develop procedures and protocols for how these reviews were going to take place, so that they would be done consistently on a statewide basis. And they have to be done within 120 days. So we started developing this in parallel with the IT systems in January of 22. And again, these were done by July 22, and staff were trained and the program up and running by the July 22 deadline. In addition to the actual reviews and training, we had to develop internal reports so that we could generate numbers and statistics on the reviews and look for training needs for the drillers based on what we were seeing in our report reviews. And this is still, although we're completed with the reports that we've developed, there's always going to be for additional information. So it is kind of an ongoing process. But the reports that we initially asked for have been completed by October 22. And they're providing us some valuable information on the kinds of things that we're seeing. So in addition to our internal reports, we also had to create the reports to drillers because we have to report to them within 120 days of the review of their well reports that the reports have been reviewed and the nature of any deficiencies that we see on their reviews. And so we developed those reports starting in approximately January of 22, and those were done in July 22. But the reports the reviews didn't kick in until July 22. So the first reports were due in October, based on those July and beyond reviews. And so those went out at the end of October, and they've prompted a few questions from drillers, but I've heard they value that information that they're getting. So as far as upcoming pieces of the bill was passed in 21, and it has parts for us that would go all the way through 24 and report to the legislature in 25. We're working right now on modifications to our IT system for changes that kick in July 23. That will change some collection of data on well reports and start parts, as well as additional notification from drillers on those documents. We began the process in July 22 after the technical well report review got started, and we anticipate having that up and in place by the July 23 deadline. And then we also have to establish training and protocols for well inspection staff based on the new data requirements for that July 23 deadline. We're working on that now. We're working in parallel with the IT systems, and we expect to have that in place and staff trained by the July 23 timeframe. Again, our communication plan, that has been critical to us throughout this whole process. We began the communication plan in 21 with the drillers, letting them know not only about the immediate upcoming changes, but really about all the changes in the bill. Because it's a complete modernization of the work that we do in our section, and a refocus on making sure the wells are constructed to standards. And by reviewing 100% of the well reports, we're able to find deficiencies that may not have been caught before when our focus was more on field inspections, and we were able to look at just a number of reports, but not all of them. And again, the rulemaking is important to us too. We need to get the rules in place for next year for the July changes, but also for everything that's already been in place. So again, we're starting that. Our first meeting is December 13th, and we'll have those hopefully in front of the commission for adoption and the rules in place prior to July 2023. Finally, the bill added 2 additional members to our continuing education committee for well constructors. So we went from 4 members to 6. The additional members were a water quality person and a person that's an expert in safety. And those have already been assigned, and they've been in place since July 2022. So as far as work on hold, the section has hundreds of thousands of well reports in our in binders in our section. Many of those reports were missed when they were initially entered back in the early 90s. The majority of them have data that is not in the computer system because at the time we did not capture all that information, and that's valuable information that we really need to have entered, but we don't have the staff to do that. And this would require additional IS staff, and it's in the 23-25 POP that would require additional funding. There's another additional piece that we would also that's also been put on hold, and that's to assign a unique physical location identifier to wells, so that every database that references a well within the department would have the unique number to reference, so that everything's tied together. Because there's parts of different water right databases, other groundwater databases, other databases that have no easy way to link specific wells to specific tasks or parts of our work. We feel that's important. It requires additional IS staff and additional funding. And again, it's in a 23-25 POP. That's it. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Chris. That was a helpful presentation. You have a lot, as for the other sections, a lot on your plate. We are a little behind, but we have time for a couple questions. If commissioners have any questions, comments?
Couple?
Yeah, please.
Chris, thank you for that. Two quick questions. One, with the investment in communication to your constituency, I'm curious, given droughts and groundwater attention, what the response has been. Are folks excited, saying finally things are getting the attention it needs? Or perhaps are people feeling a little panicky, like I got to get my well in the ground now? I'm just curious, what's your finger on the pulse of the community?
Chair Reeves, Commissioner, thank you for the question. So our focus is really related to growers. They're getting a lot more communication with us as far as their well reports being reviewed. And some are happy, some probably feel like they're being a little bit under microscope. But all in all, I think they're very happy that they're getting additional attention, that wells are meeting standards. As far as individuals, public, landowners, are concerned about dry wells, is that kind of the question? We do get a lot of questions from individuals looking for well reports, and have questions about construction of wells, but not specifically about the dry wells.
That's somewhat related to the second question is what's happening in the market generally? Are you getting an uptick in start card requests, reduction? Is it declining? Is it staying the same?
So it's staying the same. We're not seeing a big drop in numbers. We are seeing that many well drillers are a year to two out actually on drilling wells. So there's a big backlog for the construction of wells, unfortunately. But yeah, there is normal backlog.
Thank you.
Other questions, comments from commissioners? I don't see Commissioner Clem's with a hand up, so yes, please. Yeah.
Yes, I would just like to round out what Chris is talking about. He mentioned the 100% of technical reviews of well logs, and the significance there is that we have not had capacity to be able to do that. And so Chris talked about the thousands of well reports we get each year. They come in and we're not able to review them to see whether they meet minimum well construction standards. And the well driller is on the hook for that well. And it may be years before we get around to actually seeing that. Somebody buys a piece of property, they decide they want a water right. Here's the well log that I want to, from the well that I want to use. And we look at it, 15 years after it was drilled, and we go, well, this doesn't meet standards. And we go back to the driller that just went, whoa, where did this come from? So what we agreed to in this negotiation around House Bill 2145 is that for some other concessions by the industry, generally improvements in communication about where they're drilling, when they're drilling, and when they're going to be sealing the well, so we can be there. We agreed to do 100% of the well log reviews. And as Chris pointed out, it reports back to the driller within 120 days. Well, that is a much different story now when we come back to a driller and say, we have a well construction problem here, because that was just a month ago when we drilled that. So it's a better deal for the landowner, it's a better deal for the well driller, and we think it's good for us as well.
Great.
And with the staffing we have, we're able to keep up.
We got some additional staff to help with this.
Okay.
And so, yes, as far as I know, Chris, we're able to keep up on the 100% well log review so far.
Yes, we are accomplishing what we've been asked, and our people are doing a great job.
Nice coat and shirt and tie combination you've got there, Chris.
Looking good. All right, thank you, Chris. Let's see, our next agenda item is commission appointments to the Groundwater Advisory Committee. Justin Iverson will be presenting. Okay.
Okay. Good morning, Chair Reeves and members of the commission. For the record, my name is Justin Iverson. I manage the groundwater section here at the department. And it'd be great just to confirm everybody can hear me.
We can hear you.
Excellent. And that you can see on your screens just the slides and not the presentation view.
Yes.
All right, perfect. Okay, so glad to be back for our annual Groundwater Advisory Committee appointments. Just have a few slides to remind folks of how the Groundwater Advisory Committee works. So this is a 9-member committee. Folks on the committee serve 3-year terms that we've traditionally held to a 2-term limit. And these members represent various interests, expertise, and regions across the state. The statutory authority and the rules that go with it give pretty broad latitude on what types of interests can be included. Pretty much anybody with a groundwater interest, though it does specify that 3 members must be active in the well drilling industry. So a third of the members on the Groundwater Advisory Committee are active in the drilling industry. The statutory responsibilities for Groundwater Advisory Committee are to advise the Commission on any rules or rule changes related to groundwater. So coming up this year, or excuse me, next year, I should say, we've got a number of rule makings that we're planning on, and the Advisory Committee will be kept up to speed on those and have the opportunity to provide input to the Commission on that. And then they also provide input on any rules or policies related to licensing and examination of well drillers. And lastly, annually, they review the expenditures of the Start Card Fund. So we provide them with an update from our Fiscal Services Department every year on how we are allocating the Start Card Fund. So the Advisory Committee is set up such that the terms are staggered. So 3 of the 9 folks generally have a term ending every year. This year, expiring terms include Susan Baker, who represents local government. She works for the county out of Medford, and it's coming up on the end of her first term. And then we have 2 folks that are coming up to the end of their second term. So Chad Courtney, who's a driller out of Pendleton, and Mark Owens, who's representing as a groundwater irrigator out of Crane near Burns, are both coming to the end of their second terms. The process for filling their roles is that a few years ago we went to a rolling application process. So we have a website for the committee, and as on that website is an invitation for anybody interested in serving on the committee to send a letter of interest to the director. And again, we receive those year round. We also go out and solicit candidates each fall just to make sure that folks know that this appointment process is coming up. So we send out notices to the email listservs that are associated with the commission and the Groundwater Advisory Committee. That's several hundred people that receive those. Again, we kind of highlight it on the website, and we also distribute to members of professional and trade organizations, notably to the Oregon Groundwater Association, or the Drillers Trade Organization. They have a standing meeting in the fall, and typically we make a pitch at that meeting for new members as well. So this year we received 3 applications and 1 letter of support, and staff review those application materials to make our recommendations to you. So for this upcoming 3-year term, starting December 1st of this year and running through November 30th of 2025, we would like to nominate Susan Baker for a second term. We've appreciated her input. She's agreed and willing to serve a second term. And then happy to say we were able to find a couple of folks that maintain both the geographic representation as well as the groundwater interest that of the folks that are terming out of the committee. So Ken Bentz is a groundwater irrigator out of Crane. And this would be his first term if appointed. Brandon Brown is owns a drilling business out of Umatilla. And so he would be representing the monitoring well industry again out of the northeastern part of the state, and this would be his first term. And so with that, we'll present two alternatives to the commission to either appoint the recommended slate of candidates to terms on GWAC beginning December 1st, 2022 through November 30th of 2025, or to direct us to return to the next commission meeting with a different slate of candidates. And as always, we'd recommend appointing the slate of candidates. So happy to answer any questions folks might have.
Thank you, Justin. Commissioner Mall?
I move that we appoint the recommended slate of candidates to terms on the GWAC beginning December 1st, 2022 through November 30th, 2025.
Thank you. Ooh, lots of discussion. We all agree. Commissioner Kara, second. Is there any further discussion? Justin, can you take the slide off of there?
Yep, sure can. Thank you.
Let's see, Commissioner Quimps, I don't see a hand up, so I think we're ready to take a vote. Let's go around the table. Commissioner Wolf?
Yes.
Commissioner Kara?
Yes.
Commissioner Smitherman?
Yes.
Commissioner Mall?
Yes.
Commissioner Lee? Yes. Commissioner Quimps?
Yes.
Commissioner Reeves said yes. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Justin, and thank you to the people who are serving on this committee.
Thanks so much.
So let's come back. We're going to take a break now for like 2 minutes, maybe, but let's come back at 10 o'clock. Okay.
He is not, he is up there.
So we have, hello. Sorry. We have an IWRS update and progress report. So this is Crystal Grinnell. Do I have that pronunciation?
Yes,
correct?
you.
Okay. And Danielle Gonzalez. And please take it away.
Great. Thank you very much, Chair Reeves and the commissioners. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to come to you today. And we're hoping this is the first of many times as we are moving through the IWRS progress report and development. Just for the record, I'm the policy section manager, Danielle Gonzalez, and I'm joined by Crystal Grinnell. And the policy section deals with rulemaking, public records request, agency-wide media and communications, legislation, as well as the development of the IWRS. And so that's what we're here for today. We are a staff of 7 very, very mighty people. And Crystal has been spearheading the IWRS progress report and development. And one of our policy analyst staff will be joining her in the future, Laura Hart. She joined us in September, and Crystal joined us in June. So this is her first time in front of the commission. So I wanted to have the opportunity to brag a little bit about her work. As she's starting with our agency. So thanks so very much, Crystal.
Right, so nice to finally meet all of you. So I will be discussing today what I've been working on with the IWRS and the progress report that I'm sure you've heard a little bit about. So the agenda today is really to talk a little, just mention a bit about the background on the IWRS that's relevant to moving forward. I will cover the progress report and where we are at with that. And then also talk about the plan so far regarding the 5-year update process. And then of course, at the end, I'd like to give the opportunity to have some discussion. So as far as background, I think the most important piece that I wanted to mention here is that we have 2 prior versions to reference. So the first one being in 2012 and the second one in 2017. And so we do have a statute that is guiding some requirements for that document. I also wanted to mention our themes have changed a little bit over the years. So in 2012, there was a really strong emphasis on data and science as something that was needed to understand the water resources. And in 2017, we saw an emphasis on data still, and also some lessons learned. But I think the big new things that came up were dam safety, that was new, and then extreme events. So drought and floods and earthquakes got a lot more attention, and they also received some very specific recommended actions in the IWRS. So the next update, we are still, of course, very early in that phase, but some of the themes that have already kind of risen to the top that we know that we do want to address. Equity is a huge piece of that. We do want to look at all of our recommended actions in the entire document with an equity lens. And we also want to address the 100-year water vision. So that was something that has happened in that entire window since the last IWRS was published in 2017. So we think that's important to pull in there. And then also climate. I think there's opportunity to have more of a holistic climate approach to this document. So now let's move on to the progress report. So this is something that is not actually a requirement in statute associated with the IWRS, but it's something that we wanted to do because we didn't have staffing to actually put out the 5-year update. So that would have been in 2022 that was published. And since I just joined in June, kind of an interim solution here is to look back and see what we've done since the 2017 version. And I think that's really helpful. It's been great for just a background and just to see what we've accomplished. And I think a really good foundation for moving into our next update. So the audience for this progress report is essentially the legislature. So in December, during legislative days, I'll be presenting along with 3 other agencies, and we'll be presenting that progress report. And it's really just a snapshot of where we've been and what we've done towards that 2017 document. So as part of this progress report, this is essentially what I've been working on since I started. I've been gathering a lot of information and coordinating and collaborating and speaking with a lot of different agencies. So I've pulled together some resources. One of them was an existing resource, which is the Water Core team. So they already meet 2 times a month. They are the natural resource cabinet, deputy level folks or their representatives. And with the addition of three other agencies that are not natural resource cabinet. So those are Business Oregon, OHA, and ODOT. Those folks are also there. So that has been a fantastic resource just for being able to communicate on a regular basis about what progress they've been making on the IWRS and their water related actions. And then the other team that I've pulled together is we're calling the IWRS project team. And so that is just one or two representatives from each one of those agencies. So we've got ODA, ODQ, and ODF&W. And in the past, the reason we decided to create that team at this point, at this early phase, is in the past, that has been the project team that actually is the main authors for the IWRS update. So that's why those three agencies are highlighted there. So we've already had 2 meetings and they've been, of course, very helpful on the progress report, but I will continue meeting with those folks for the entire IWRS update. And then finally, an internal team that I put together is a WRD team. So I found folks from very distinct specialties that we have within WRD, and I've been meeting with those folks to make sure that I'm really, first of all, understanding all of the things that WRD does related to the IWRS, but then also communicating those very specific accomplishments. So again, that team will be consistent through both the progress report, and then that will carry forward through the update as well, so next year. So just to highlight some of the things that I've learned from this, all of this communication, I've really been trying to get at what programs these different agencies are doing that are related to the IWRS, because I think that's a really good picture and snapshot of what's ongoing work, right? There's some things that are very, sometimes there's a one-off project associated with funding or legislation, but I think it's also really helpful to understand what the core of what these different agencies do and their programs and how they will consistently be interacting with the IWRS. And then I've also been trying to consolidate their accomplishments and identify those very specific things, that would be like a project, a report, or a project that was installed or completed or constructed. And then also their rulemaking. So I've been speaking with their legislative coordinators as well to understand if there's been any significant change in the last few years that have honestly just benefited water quality or water quantity or any of the other elements within the IWRS. So what I found overall is there's a really amazing amount of agency collaboration. So I think that's the piece that when you see the final progress report, that is the common thread there. I've been trying to tease out exactly what those relationships are, which I think will be helpful for moving forward in the IWRS update. And just in terms of status of where this is at, we are in the very, kind of final pieces here of pulling together the draft. Of course, the presentation to the legislature is in about 3 weeks. So the summary is not completely done yet, but so the next meeting, I believe, is in March with the Water Resources Commission. I will be presenting the full report at that time. So it's still a little too early to, provide that document, but just some take homes that I am learning so far is that we've done as a state a really good job of addressing pretty much all of the recommended actions. And I'm also finding that there are some recommended actions that are a little too specific and a little too vague. So that is kind of an interesting take home. I feel like there's generally some recommended actions that are very obviously pointed towards certain agencies and work that they do. And then also the opposite, where there are some recommended actions that just about everybody is participating in. So agencies and private sector as well. So those are some take homes so far.
And just to reiterate, that's that progress report, not necessarily the entire IWRS update.
Yes, so now I'll move into talking more about the update. So the update itself is the 5-year update, the one that we're required to do according to statute. So that process, again, the progress report is just a helpful foundation moving forward. Nothing that's required, but the update is required. And so the first step really in that process is, of course, our outreach and engagement. And so right now we're in the very early phases of that. We have reached out to a consultant and are finalizing contracting right now. And this particular consultant will help us with facilitation, and they specialize in making sure that we are working with underrepresented communities. And then they're also going to be helping us put together the full outreach and engagement plan. So that will be a plan that actually touches on all of the different pieces that we'll need to pull together. So that will be all sectors of the public and stakeholders and tribes and all of those elements as well. And then the outreach and engagement that once the plan is done, hopefully, early 2023, we'll move into the actual engagement itself. And that will be happening in spring and summer of 2023. And while that is happening, while we're doing all of those workshops and outreach and engagement sessions, there's going to be ongoing agency input. So the water core team will still be meeting twice a month, and that is an excellent venue for getting feedback along the way. I also had mentioned the other two teams that I've pulled together, the IWRS project team, where I've got individuals from ODA, DEQ, and ODFW. We'll be working and attending all of those engagement sessions as well. So we'll be hearing what the public and stakeholders have to say. And of course, the internal IWRS team within WRD. And then of course, the Water Resource Commission meetings. I think that's another venue that we really want to utilize for this whole entire updating process. I think the March meeting that we have planned, that's going to be a great time to, basically we'll have some understanding of our outreach and engagement plan. So we can present that and talk about that. And then the other meetings, I would like to have some more, engagement and feedback from this team. Right, and finally, just moving from that progression there of outreach and engagement and, having the agency involvement, public stakeholder involvement, we'll move into a draft development. And so that with all of that input, we will have a consultant engagement report. So that consultant that we're hiring to do the outreach and engagement plan, they also are putting together a report of all their findings. And so that's going to be a really key piece that we need to fold into this IWRS update. And then of course, the IWRS project team. So in the past, those folks have been the primary authors. So just to re-emphasize, it's not just a WRD document, and we're not the only authors on that document. It's also these other agencies. These sister agencies are our closest authors. And of course, other agencies will be contributing as well. And then we will move into a draft release for public review and comment. We're thinking probably 1 or 2 months for that window, and then revisions, of course, to address those comments, and then final adoption by the commission. Those are our general steps. All right, and that is all that I have for today. So any questions?
Thank you. Commissioner Lee?
Yeah, with the legislative committee coming up soon, when do you anticipate that the commissioners would receive a copy of the report?
That's a great question.
Yeah. I was gonna say, I can speak to that, yeah. So we can actually get that as soon as it is ready. Typically it'll be ready the week before we have our legislative work, which is, I believe, December 7th, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes,
That's our
that is the
date
date.
for when we have to have it ready. So Crystal is very much knee deep into getting all of the pieces together. I think one of the other pieces to add with the legislative work is, we have a policy option package, because Crystal is, unfortunately, the position is only a limited duration. And so she's only funded until June of 2023. And so our policy option package, the first one in our priority for the agency, is to extend that and make it a permanent position. And so that's something that we're really going to push on for OWRD, but then also some of the other policy option packages, we're going to utilize that avenue we have in front of the committee to make sure that they know what resources need to be in place for us to move forward and finish out the biennium.
Thank you.
Great. I didn't see that.
Yeah.
Me too. Crystal, could you take the screen down just for now? Because I want to be able to see.
Yes.
Commissioner Clemson has got a hand up. Let's see. I have a, oh yes, I do. Commissioner Clemson has a question or a comment.
Good morning. Thank you. So I'm really happy to see the integration across department agencies with the different staff from OWRD, Department of Ag, DEQ, and ODA, Fish and Wildlife. Earlier, Commissioner Mall was talking about, opportunities for maybe integration or collaboration with other commissions. And it got me thinking that it might be productive to have maybe a retreat type of function with 2 or more commissions and use the integrated water resources strategy and some of the outstanding needs in it, where with these multiple staff, we might work on policy issues that would benefit the work of the departments. Hopefully things that the public could actually see as an outcome. But also, for, to demonstrate that we are working to integrate across our respective responsibilities. I know doing something like that would be challenging with everybody's schedules, and we'd need to be, I think, focused and have work lined up and make the most of it. But I think it would be an interesting prospect for us to consider when we think about our work in the future and trying to collaborate. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree.
I second
Sarah,
that.
for what it's worth.
Second that motion.
Thank you. Yes, Commissioner Moss.
I'll go quick. Go quick. Thank you for all of your work. And you just started and you've already managed to put all of this together. So really great job. And hopefully we can keep you on longer. Just as you were talking about outreach, and I'm just curious, is that going to be, have you kind of thought about what that's going to look like? Are you planning to visit areas of the state and hold presentations and get feedback from community members?
Yes, so one of the most exciting pieces about having the consultants that we've identified is that we're actually doing kind of a pre-step to that, which is figuring out how folks want to be engaged. So they are actually going to be conducting interviews on that front.
Wow.
So it's really not us just coming to the table and saying, this is how we want to engage. How do we get people to show up? It's actually looking at the front end of that and saying, where do people gather? Where should we be reaching out to them? What works best for them? So
And you're looking at virtual options these
Yeah.
days now.
a combination,
Yeah.
hopefully. That's what I'm imagining. And of course, making sure that we are really representing the full geographic range of the state. So yes, it will look, I think, probably different than it has in the past, but we're making sure that we're doing that front end work to reach out to folks before we come up with the plan.
That's great. And then where you're going to utilize the Oregon's kitchen table.
Yes,
Okay.
exactly.
So
And
look
we're-
into that a little bit.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you for your question.
Just following up on that point, I hope that the department and the other agencies will be able to use the outreach portion of this effort to build the equity outreach that as is listed behind in our chart. It seems like a good opportunity that kind of dovetail these two efforts. So I'll be hoping to see some progress on that front too, as you guys work through that, as we all work through it.
Yeah.
I have one other question, or observation, let me just get it out there, Joe, when you're on, but I think this report to the legislature that you're doing is a great idea, and its timing is fabulous because there is so much legislative energy focused on water issues right now, and this is an opportunity for the agencies to kind of talk to the legislators about what's been going on behind the scenes, which is, as you know, because you've been working on this, unbelievable. I mean, OM just had a water panel at our last meeting, and I was quite amazed at how much is happening across agencies and how much of it is interagency. So I think it's I'm really happy to hear that this report is going to be going forward.
Thank you, Chair Reeves. And there's some thought and strategy behind, working through the legislature this way. But then also because of the fact that the timing for the IWRS sometimes doesn't always align with the legislative sessions and your work for the budget process. The reason that we have our timing and our schedule, it's pretty, we're doing it pretty aggressively. So we can make sure that we have the structure, the recommendations, so then agencies can go and start developing their personal work plans together. And so that maybe that's where Commissioner Clem's idea really comes together on how this looks with the recommendations there. We want to be able to have those recommendations in hand to then go to the legislature for the next biennium. So, biennium, the 25-27. So the timing is really, really good in that scenario. So we didn't necessarily plan for that with not being able to do it in 2022. It just would have been a little bit premature. We wouldn't have had time. But in this scenario, we'll have a little bit more time to make sure that we have 2 biennia with those recommendations instead of just 1. So I think there's some other things that we could potentially do on the timing to make sure that we are doing, maybe we look at progress reports, internally, because I think we have found that it has actually been really, really helpful for us to work with the other agencies. So we can also highlight their work and vice versa when we're going to the legislature.
That's great, thank you. Commissioner Wong.
I did, thank you. At first, yes, I really do like Eric's idea, and logistics I know are really difficult, but really would love to see some gathering. And I'm really excited to hear that you're going to be coming back frequently to the commission. I feel like this is the core of what the commission is asked to do. I'm excited about that. And with all due respect to our dear friend, Director Brenda Bateman, where is DLCD? It continues to puzzle me that the IWRS project team, and historically it makes sense. ODA is big water use, representing big water users. ODFW, big water considerations would be huge from a quality standpoint, but just the example we had with the well report, landowners are developing land based on assumptions about water, and things are changing. All of the huge pressures around the state that are land development driven, and water comes along in the aftermath and becomes an anchor at times and becomes problematic, and you've got to get ahead of it. And so I know it's not your place necessarily. I know each agency has priorities, and each agency is dealing with the same thing that WRD is in terms of backlog of projects needed and the difficulty of getting into that second quadrant to really be strategic in our thinking, working. But if there's any way that through the core team or otherwise, we can get more presence, and probably way out of hand for me to recommend, can get DLCD on that project team. But I'll say it over and over again. I can't overemphasize how important I think land use planning and DLCD could be, and integrated in an update to the strategy and work.
Commissioner Mall, that's a great point of feedback. One of the first meetings that Crystal and I had with the IWRS was with Director Bateman. So I think your feedback is well taken, and we'll kind of go back and see what we can look at.
Thank you.
Commissioner Mall, I do have one additional comment. So DLCD is also on the water core team. And so they have been great as far as just communicating all of their accomplishments and a lot of conversation back and forth about what they are doing that does relate to the IWRS. And I would agree that there wasn't quite the same emphasis on some of the earlier versions of the IWRS that I think we do need to highlight in this next version. And so as they grow, and I think maybe have more capacity, I can see there being more involvement. And just additionally, that small team of ODA, DQ, and ODFW, that's also, maybe that's a legacy that we've had. And it was, 2 of those 3 agencies were very specifically identified in the in statute as needing to work with those folks more closely. But I don't see that there's any reason that we need to exclude them or not have them at the table, especially with the new emphasis. I think that the state in general is really placing on housing as well. So that's just such a current topic, and water supply is incredibly important.
Let us know how we can help bring them into the project team if it helps.
Thank you.
Yes, Commissioner Powell.
On your outreach, I'm concerned that we don't listen to our young folks enough. So I'm hoping on your outreach that one of the groups that you consider reaching out to are college students, even down to our high school students. Climate issues are in the forefront of many of these of our young people. And I think getting your perspective on water issues would be a helpful thing to add to our water, integrated water resources strategy, so that we're taking their perspective and planning for the future. Other than that, great work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, really great work. I'm really looking forward to having this process get underway. Thank you for all that you're doing. Okay, I think we're on to our next agenda item. Actually, are our next presenters ready to go? I see Kim up there. Sherry is ready. She is, okay, good. And there, great. All right, this is about our next agenda item is water project grant and loan award funding recommendations. So Kim and Adair, would you like to introduce yourself and take it away?
Thank you, Chair Reeves. For the record, I'm Kim Fritz-Ogren. I manage the Planning, Collaboration, and Investment section here at the Water Resources Department. And with me today is Adair Muth, our grant coordinator. And we are going to be presenting on our water project grants and loans funding opportunity 2 specific action items that we're requesting the Commission consider. So I'm going to share my screen here. Can folks see the presentation, or are you seeing my notes slide? So as I mentioned, we are presenting 2 different action items for the department's consideration. The first is requesting a decision on funding recommendations for the 2022 funding cycle for water project grants and loans. And then the second piece is requesting approval for a budget increase for a grant award made in 2021. Adair and I are in the Planning, Collaboration, and Investment section at the Water Resources Department. Just as a reminder, our section's mission is to build partnerships and incentivize Oregonians to pursue integrated and innovative solutions for complex water management challenges in an uncertain future. We do this through 5 service areas: strategic investments, which is part of which we'll talk about today, adaptive planning, cooperative partnerships, accessible information, and effective coordination. Often folks are more familiar with the trajectory of support that we offer, starting with planning and identifying actions and solutions that folks want to take to address water issues. Then a funding opportunity called feasibility study grants, where folks can investigate the feasibility of water conservation, reuse, and storage projects. And then water project grants and loans, where we provide funds to implement those projects. So more specifically, water project grants and loans purpose is to fund water supply projects that meet either in-stream and or out-of-stream water needs and achieve public benefits in 3 categories: environmental, economic, and social/cultural or community benefits. The funding opportunity has been around since 2016, And we offer an annual funding cycle. Since then, we have funded 34 projects for just over about $36 million. And the number of projects funded varies from year to year. Each application is reviewed before we come to the commission with funding recommendations. Here's an overview of that process. After we receive applications, we do an initial eligibility and completeness review prior to then making the public and affected tribes aware that folks are requesting funding for those applications. So we contact affected tribes to let them know of projects in their area and provide an opportunity for government to government conversation and input on the review. We also post the applications online for a 60-day public comment period. All of that information submitted and the actual applications themselves is evaluated by a multi-agency technical review team, which scores based on those public benefits. The multi-agency review team's funding recommendations are then posted for another 30-day public comment period. And then we come and bring recommendations to the commission for you to make awards. The technical review team consists of the Water Resources Department, along with Oregon Department of Agriculture, Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, Business Oregon, Regional Solutions, the Oregon Health Authority, and the Department of Environmental Quality. They do a review of the applications on their own, consult with their colleagues within their organization. Then we come together to meet and discuss the applications, consider any comments from the public or tribes, and then take all that information to score the applications and make a funding recommendation. The scoring considers both positive and negative impacts. So if we're looking, say, at environmental benefits, one of those that's considered is there an improvement to groundwater levels. That's one example. And so we would look, is there potential for improved groundwater levels, or will it contribute to additional declines? The TRT evaluates the likelihood of achieving the claimed benefits. So looking for that evidence to prove that the project will provide the benefits. They evaluate the change in conditions described, and once again, are looking for that supporting evidence or documentation to have some assurance that this investment of money will result in a positive benefit to Oregon. Here is the scoring scale that we use that demonstrates that consideration of positive and negative benefits. And then, if there's a variety of different public benefits, and sometimes you're just really exceptional in one. And so we have this sort of, it's not a traditional linear scale, but it considers the sort of unique factors. So if you're looking in total, per statute, there are 6 identified public benefits in each category. And so if you looked at that 12, so you have a maximum available of 72 points. There's also in statute a requirement for some preference. So there's preference for you're legally protecting stream flow, and if there's collaboration. So we have some points for that, which results in that there's 240 total points available. In statute, we are also allowed to set a minimum score in order to make sure that these investments are producing public benefits. And so we chose to set a minimum score of 7 to be funded within each category. Once again, the statute tells us that for this funding opportunity, we want a project to produce benefits in each of those 3 areas. So once again, you have to have that minimum score of 7 in each of the 3 areas. And that's a little bit sort of overview about the funding opportunity. Now I'm going to hand things over to Adair, who will talk more specifically about the 2022 funding cycle.
Great, thank you, Kim. Good morning, Chair Reeves and Commissioners. My name is Adair Muth, and going to talk to you a little bit more about our 2022 funding cycle. So this year, our application deadline was April 27th. We received 4 complete applications that were requesting just over 7.3 million in funding. So after we did the completeness check that Kim talked about, we posted the applications online for a 60-day public comment period. We also reached out to the tribes, and we did not receive any comments from the tribes or public comments. So then our technical review team met in July for an all-day in-person meeting and discussed, evaluated, and scored the applications as Kim described earlier. So the projects were ranked based on their greatest public benefit score. So after that all-day technical review team meeting, they recommended funding projects ranked number 1 through 3. And based on the public benefit score, they did not recommend funding project number 4 at this time. So the 3 projects that they have recommended for funding are the Deschutes Basin Flow Restoration Group 4, requesting $2 million, the East Fork Irrigation District Sublateral Modernization Project, requesting about $823,000, and the Mill Creek Park Aquifer Storage and Recovery Project, requesting about $3.8 million for a total of 6.6. Go ahead. The project that they did not recommend for funding at this time is the Klamath Irrigation District Supervisory Control and Data Acquisition and Automation Improvements Project. Again, this project did not meet the minimum score in all 3 public benefit categories. So after the TRT made their funding recommendations, we posted those recommendations online and held another public comment period. This was in August 11th through September 12th. Again, we reached out to the tribes to see if they had any comments on the funding recommendation. We didn't receive any comments from the tribes or the public. So now I'm going to talk a little bit more about the 3 projects that are recommended for funding by the technical review team and the department. And again, just to reiterate, per statute, this funding is really meant for projects that achieve public benefits in all 3 of these public categories. So the 3 projects that met that this year, the highest ranked project was the Deschutes Basin Flow Restoration Group 4. This is a conservation, water infrastructure, flow restoration, and protection project that was brought to us by the Tumalo Irrigation District in Deschutes County, requesting $2 million. A little bit more about this project. So they are proposing to pipe almost 59,000 feet of these various canals and laterals, and 100% of the water that is conserved through this project would be protected through the department's allocation of conserved water program. And they're anticipating that would be about 2.24 CFS. And then at the bottom of the slide, you can see the scores that the TRT gave them, a breakdown for each section and then their total score. The second project that was recommended for funding is the East Fork Irrigation District's Sublateral Modernization Project. This is also a conservation, water infrastructure, flow restoration and protection project. This is in Hood River. And they are proposing with their project to install 15 pressure reducing stations, remove water boxes, and replace a little over 11,000 feet of non-pressure rated pipe with pressure rated pipe. And again, this project would also legally protect the conserved water resulting from this project through the department's allocation of conserved water program. In this case, they anticipate that to be about 1.5 CFS. And the final project that is recommended for funding is the City of Staten's Mill Creek Park Aquifer Storage and Recovery Project. This is a below ground storage project in Marion County, requesting over $3.8 million. This project is to develop an aquifer storage and recovery system that would store about 156 million gallons of drinking water for the City of Staten. And this would provide a redundant water source to improve their municipal water security and drought resilience. A note about this project, it will require the establishment of a seasonally varying flow through the department. And again, the scores are at the bottom. Sorry, Kim, go ahead. So with that, that brings us to the funding award. As a reminder, per statute and rule, the commission shall make the final decision based on these 4 items. So we bring to you today the following alternatives. The commission may consider: number 1, adopting the funding recommendation contained of table 2 of this report, which is item D, to fund 3 applications for a total award of $6,642,745. Number 2, adopt a modified funding recommendation. Or number 3, direct the department to further evaluate the applications and return with a revised recommendation. So the acting director's recommendation that we bring to you on his behalf is number 1, to adopt the funding recommendation contained in table 2 of the report. And with that, Kim and I are happy to answer any questions about our first item. Thank you.
Questions from Commissioner Lee? I don't have a question, but as the former manager of Tummel Irrigation District and what they're doing in the system, I would like to move the adoption of their funding recommendations contained in table 2 of this report to fund 3 applications for a total award of $6,642,745. Thank you. Do we have a second? Commissioner Kahara, second. So any conversation, questions, Commissioner Mall?
Do you mind taking the slide down so we can see everyone? Thank you. Thank you, Kim and Dare. Thank you. Yeah, I have a handful of questions, observations. So just a reminder. So the scores that we see are out of a total of 240 points, right? Okay. So once again, I mean, we have 3 recommended projects that are well below 50% of the total recommended points. And we've talked about this before, how difficult, and yet how the scoring matrix, something's just not clicking. If, you know, we're awarding projects that are, you know, on a grading scale are getting a 15% and a 37%, 32% and a 40%. And we're not awarding one that's getting an 11%. And I understand that the underlying decision to make sure that each of the 3 public benefit categories has at least a 7 is one of the ways that KIT project gets paused. It bothers me. It continues to bother me that our approach to this grant making has an approach that seems to not really be. It's hard to rectify those 2 things. So I just want to acknowledge that again and encourage us to, on an ongoing basis, look at the program and see if there are things that we can do to adjust how we are scoring things, but because I just feel like it doesn't seem to be working as well as I think it could. So related to that, I would love to hear other commissioners' thoughts on that KID proposal. I know that the legislation calls for an equitable distribution of value across all 3 of those areas. If you look at the KID proposal, it's very high. It's equally as high on the economic side as at least 1, if not 2, of the other applications fall short on social and environmental. In terms of what the grant program can do for the state, this is one of those areas where I feel like there seems to be a fair bit of discretion in scoring. Why isn't there an equal level of discretion in award making? And again, we've had these discussions before, and I understand there are limits to things, but I'd like to continue to push on and help us to consider those limits. So I'll stop there. We'd love to hear other commissioners' thoughts on that one below the line.
Any other thoughts on that?
Isn't there also a cap on the amount of money that is available for this funding? Did that play into the decision as well?
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, we should find out. I mean, this was not recommended as, like one of those fun, but it's below the line kind of rush. It was kind of rejected, I think, on the merits. But I'm sure there is an amount of money in it. We're capped.
Kim, who has her hand up.
Please.
Yes, Chair Reeves and Commissioner Lee, there is a set amount of money available in the fund. I believe it's about close to 10, but just under $10 million that's currently available in our account. And then we anticipate that another $15 million of bonds will be sold, and that money will be placed in the account in spring of 2023. So there is enough funding that didn't come into play for this funding recommendation. But I will note that the money that's available is for this and future funding cycles. The commission is not required to obligate all funds, because the idea is, well, there might be other applications that come in next year that would provide greater public benefit that the commission might want to fund. So those are just two things to consider. Money available for all 4 projects, but that money doesn't go away. It's there for future funding cycles.
Yes, for sure.
As a relatively new commissioner and not having, I think this is the second one of these funding cycles that I've sat in on, and understanding that there's 240 points available, but having submitted one of these applications myself, I was wondering if there's been a trend in decreasing scores as each funding cycle comes forth, which would suggest that the current application process, the quality of the projects are relative to these metrics decreasing or not. Great question.
Commissioner Wolf, I will note that when you applied and early in the funding opportunities life, we had a 100-point scale that we used to evaluate projects. So projects could score up to 5 points per public benefit. And we found that was really hard for our reviewers, because what's the difference between like 1 minor benefit, 2 medium benefit? It didn't quite work out. And so I'm not recalling what year we changed to the 240-point scale to provide some flexibility and distinguish between minor versus exceptional benefit in a category. But we did that to try to get to some of what I think Commissioner Mall is talking about. We don't have as much flexibility in the public benefits that we score, but is there a way to address some things through the actual scoring? So that makes it difficult to compare year over year, because we had that change in scoring, just from a pure numbers standpoint. But I would say just my professional observation over the years is I have not observed a decline in the quality of applications. I think it really varies based on a number of factors. Some organizations they have more staff capacity. They're used to going out for grants. They've accessed resources like doing pre-application conferences, and they're able to put together a competitive funding application. Others have found partner organizations to work with to put things together. And then yet others, they find out about our funding opportunity maybe late in the game, and it's really hard to put together an application, but we only have an annual funding cycle. And so they're rushing to get that done. And we've made a number of these observations of where it's easy for applicants to get in the door and where it's harder. And we've identified a number of actions that we want to take to make the funding opportunity more accessible, to help applicants put together a competitive application, that the barrier isn't trying to figure out the public benefit scores and whatnot.
Do you feel like through the history of the program that, that it's worked well, that the applications that have been denied have deserved to, or do you feel like that there's some due to the process that maybe haven't been funded that you would have thought going into it maybe should have?
Commissioner Wolf, I'd say all of the projects funded through water project grants and loans achieve the public benefits in those three categories, and that's what the statute was set up to do. And there are other projects that are good projects that I think would deserve funding, and I'd hope that they would be successful, but they turn out to not be a good fit for this funding opportunity because of those public benefits. And often in the review team meeting, we have different folks there like, oh, this is great, but it just doesn't provide these environmental benefits as is intended by this funding opportunity. But Business Oregon has some other funding that might be a better fit for this project because it's a municipal project, or we'll find out that there are certain projects like dam rehabilitation where it's often not a good fit for our funding opportunity. And there isn't a lot of funding for dams out there. And so we need to look at that as a state or with the feds to figure out how do we address that problem. So I hope that answers your question about, there are a lot of good projects. It's just, are they a good fit for what this funding opportunity intends to do?
Thank you.
Commissioner Smitherman and then Commissioner Quinn.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Kim. I was just curious, does KID have an opportunity to revise their grant application and be put back into the running for next cycle?
Commissioner Smitherman, yes. After funding decisions are made, we reach out to all of the applicants, either to tell them congratulations or to tell them that they were not funded. And for those not funded, we give them the opportunity to have a conversation so that we can help them maybe understand better why their application wasn't funded and where they have opportunities to revise and resubmit. And I will note that in the past, there have been applicants who were not recommended for funding and were not selected for funding, and they did come back in following years and receive funding.
Thank you. That was going to be my second question. And then just curious if then also you might identify some other funding opportunities to assist KID with their project.
Yes, when we are aware of funding opportunities that we think might be a good fit, we try to point folks in that direction.
Thank you.
Commissioner Quinn.
Good morning. Thank you. I was curious on the Mill Creek Aquifer Storage and Recovery Project. It says that the injected water would be drinking water quality. I'm assuming that's water that's been treated. Is that correct?
Commissioner Quims, yes, I do believe that is correct if I'm recalling from the application.
I think we should, just be explicit about that it does go through a treatment process, and, I'm supportive of the project, but I think we also need to consider long-term, if there are risks to the aquifer from treatment or treatment methods that we need to be monitoring and improving over time. So I think we should be clear that we are treating the water before we put it in the ground, and just try to avoid problems in the future if we can. So thank you.
Okay, Kim or Adair, where does the must meet a minimum of 7 score requirement come from?
Chair Reeves, that is a number that was set by the department as a practice or policy. We looked at the scoring scale, that sort of 0 to 12 per public benefit category, and we were trying to figure out within that what is something that would provide more than like a minor benefit, right? If the ultimate goal of and purpose of the funding opportunity is to, fund projects that meet in-stream and or out-of-stream needs and produce these public benefits, what seems reasonable for a minimum that would ensure that good investment, but not be too limiting. And so we looked at there are 6 public benefits in each category. If you look in more detail at the scoring guidance, you can get a 1 for a minor benefit, or often if you make a claim, but that claim is unsubstantiated or just unclear. So often it's fairly reasonable to expect that you can get a 1 in each public benefit. So you could get up to a 6 pretty easily with there some being uncertainty. And so we wanted to have that just above there. A 7 begins to get into that more moderate benefit. And so that is the logic there. And it's not set in statute. It's just our attempt to set a reasonable minimum. If the commission has guidance, we'd be happy to consider changing that.
How long has it been in place? Is this like from the beginning of the program or the more recent development?
The minimum of 7, I believe, has been in place since we shifted to that 250 or 240 point scale. The previous minimum was like a score of 1 in each of the public benefit categories. So it's like a score of 3 out of 100 was the minimum, to once again not have it be too high of a barrier. And I apologize that I'm not recalling what year we shifted to the 240 point scale. It might have been 2018 or 2019.
And just last kind of nuts and bolts question. Do you have a sense of, since we shifted to the 240 scale, in what neighborhood are the highest scores we've seen of projects?
Chair Reeves, that is a great question. And unfortunately, it is not jumping to my postpartum memory right now. I'll look and see if Adair might recall. No one ever gets near 240. I will say that, because the idea is exceptional means exceptional. It would be, I'd say, near impossible for a project to score a 12 or even, in all 18 public benefit categories. So I'm guessing like 100 is what's like, but I should not say that, and I should actually follow up with me.
I'm really speaking from memory, and I could be totally off base, but I don't remember a score even approaching 100 since we kind of started this program. And I just wonder whether if we're getting benefit from the increased amount of scoring possible, which really doesn't, in the end, I don't think that really gets that. Your question, I think, really doesn't have to do with how many scores, points are possible.
May I respond? Sure. On the surface, I think you're right. The raw number doesn't necessarily, it's the distribution. The distribution between a project which doesn't.
Oh goodness, I broke the chair.
It's getting tense in the more resources. Take a 5-minute break, fully on break.
What happened? They haven't been using it so long that they just got.
I almost fell over on Director Byron one time.
Oh.
First.
Wow. Yeah, it's like,
Sorry
to interrupt.
Well, Nirvana just pointed out that we were 45 minutes ahead.
Yeah.
New chair here, but you'll have to sign for it.
Wow. I just broke off.
Okay, we need to get you taken care of.
Good conversation. Okay,
You wanna take a break?
quick break. We'll be back in, well, let's say 5 minutes.
That climate contract would be.
Yeah, or do you want to?
So. Well, it seemed to me when I go through the process that.
Guys, you know what? I hate to do this, but
Certainly think
we
it's-
shouldn't really, we can't really
Yeah,
talk about this because
yeah.
we're not in a meeting right now.
I'll bring it up.
Yeah.
Ronnie, did you? You will turn off automatically.
And it's like, okay,
Are you three thinking two?
oh. No.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
was a
The
heroic
TV
effort.
went off. I think I was actually touching the wrong button, yeah.
Commissioners, this is Kenneth Mabry, and he's one of our fantastic.
Thanks for your help. with
Yeah,
this.
he is.
Oh.
Him and you'll meet Ken tomorrow. This is Kenneth and you'll meet Ken tomorrow. He's gonna be our IT support and they have just been, we wouldn't be doing this without them. They really made it all come together.
Thank you.
You're good.
There you go. All right, I think we're ready to reconvene. Injury having been addressed. So we were talking about,
Yeah,
you
I
had the
was-
floor, Joe.
We were talking about the scoring itself, and,
Right.
let me, again, both Kim and Adair, I hope that none of this, I'm not trying to direct any of this, and either of you in management of the program. I think we are handcuffed by the statute, the way it's set up, that the way the grant program was limited by statute, we're starting to see more and more of its limitations. Is the argument I'm trying to make, and I'm hoping that there's, again, discretion at the staff level, at the assessment level to deal with those limitations, because obviously we can't change statute. And so it's not the score number itself, it's relative. I think you have a couple of things going on. One, we haven't talked about at all. We had 4 applications. My guess is that there were a number of applicants, potential applicants who checked in, looked at it and decided against it. But 4 applications for millions of dollars, that's not great. That's a sign that something about the system is limiting. Second thing, when you start to look at the scoring and you have a spread that relative, again, from a percentage of scoring is well below the 50% mark, it's another sign. Okay, something's just not right. We've talked about this before, that the triumvirate of the triple bottom line of environment, social, and economic is a great thing to go after. But if we step back from the IWRS perspective and look at the goals of the department and the way that a grant program can support those goals, it seems to me that if the overall grant program can support the triple bottom line, we should be able to have some flexibility to award some grants that are heavy in one area, because it's a progressive approach to something at a time when we're running into serious problems. So that's why I raised the question. I do want to always, again, encourage as much staff discretion in these sorts of things as possible. And Commissioner Smitherman, your encouragement to help applicants, not only with the application, but identifying other resources in that direction. I hope we can continue to go.
Yes, questions.
Is there a certain percentage of total project cost? And maybe I missed this and I'm sorry, I'm still trying to understand a little bit, but is there a percentage of total project costs that we are allowed to award? I'm just looking at in particular Mill Creek, because it seems as though we're almost funding the whole project. So I was just curious. There was a cutoff.
Yeah, Commissioner Smitherman, in statute, we can fund up to 75% of the total project cost. So there's a 25% cost match requirement, and that can be met either in kind or with cash.
Commissioner Wolf, did you?
But it seemed to me when I did the project, and I'm failing to remember specifically, but in some categories, if you scored well in a certain category, it was inherent that just by the nature of the category that you did well in, there was another category that you weren't going to score well in. Just they seemed to be offsetting, if I remember correctly. Am I mistaken there, Kim, or is that still accurate?
Commissioner Wolf, the public benefits haven't changed because they're written in statute, and an observation that our applicants have made, that our stakeholders have made, and we've made is that some of those are, they almost seem duplicative, or at the same point, if you score one better in one, you will maybe score not as well in the other. It is a bit of a mix. And yeah, I'll end it there.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Quince?
Thank you. I realize this is a good discussion. I know Commissioner Mall has raised this before. I'm wondering when we have a set of proposals before us that are based on our current system and solicitation. So I'm wondering when in our work continuum in the next cycle, is it a good time for us to spend more time on this before the solicitation, so that any changes this commission might want to make can be incorporated? You know, how far out is that potentially? Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Commissioner Quince. So funding applications are generally due in the spring, towards the end of April. And so if we wanted to make any changes, it would be good for us to start making those now, because we try to post a revised application like in January at the latest, to give folks time to, I mean, they can look, and it doesn't generally change much, so folks can be developing an application sooner. But if there are tweaks, and if there were to be a major change, we'd want to do that as soon as possible.
Okay, thank you.
How is it, and again, I apologize if I'm missing something, but how is it that we go about deciding whether or not someone gets 75% of the project covered versus 50% of the project?
Yeah, Commissioner Smitherman, thanks for asking. So we look to the applicant to identify that. In the application, they put in the amount of funding that they're requesting. And so it's their choice if they want to request up to that 75%, or perhaps they have received funding from other entities, and so they're only looking for a final 25%. We let them indicate what their funding needs are. And we currently do not have a cap, like a total dollar amount cap that folks can request either.
Thank you.
I've seen that happen in other commissions where a grantee was denied funding, made an appeal during the meeting, not this wasn't with the DRD, and the board agreed to fund at I think there was a discussion right then and there. Can you bring 50% match instead of 25% match? And the answer was yes, and it was awarded. So that's the kind of example of discretion that I feel like this can be really helpful in the grant program.
Thank you. Joe, just to follow up on your specific question about what commissioners think about this KID proposal. I see your point. As I look at these two in particular, the Mill Creek project and this one, and the KID one. But I'm also, I'm really reluctant to exercise discretion with respect to a threshold that the agency kind of has in place for this, the 5 and the 4 score for this particular round, and whether that gets changed going forward. To Eric's point, I think it's a different conversation. So I guess that's my thinking.
I agree. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to imply that I was advocating that we fund the KID proposal, but I do think the issues warrant a good discussion we just had and some continued work on this.
Okay. So we have a motion on the floor in a second. We also have a request for public comment. So let's hear from April Snell before we vote. Oh, yeah, I think nobody,
Anyway.
it just picks up the voice. It's a miracle.
Just watch the chair.
Yeah.
Chair Reeves, commissioners, for the record, April Snell, Executive Director of the Oregon Water Resources Congress. It's so nice to see you guys in person. Just a few comments on the decision you're about to make, but more importantly, weighing in on the discussion you're having. I think, Commissioner Mole, you raised very valid points, and just to emphasize a few of those, well, let me go back a few steps. One, OWRC is an association of irrigation districts and similar ag water suppliers, very much is looking for opportunities at the state level to fund piping and different sorts of water conservation, efficiency, and water supply projects. The genesis of the program was Senate Bill 839, which was passed in 2013. Our association was part of a coalition of water users and conservation interests who helped make that legislation possible. However, I was not in the room, nor was I involved in the sausage making of the language that actually ended up on paper in the actual law, which I think a lot of folks recognize as being needed to be improved. But just kind of going back, because I think it's important to understand the context. After the bill was passed in 2013, there were two task force, one which was governance and the other being seasonally varying flows, which apply to storage projects that would be new or expanded storage, of which I think there's been one project that has went through the seasonally varying flow process. Those two task force then led to a rulemaking that developed the rules that we still have in place today. I served on all three of those groups, and anybody who similarly went through that experience, trust me, we're not itching to go back through and have those discussions. It was very difficult, and I don't think it would be any easier today. However, the rules at least need to be updated. And I would encourage the commission and staff to look at your other agencies at the state level and how they go about such endeavors. I will highlight specifically that the DEQ's Clean Water State Revolving Loan Fund uses a rules advisory committee. I've served on that multiple times to both provide recommendations on specific rule changes as well as guidance on how that program operates. I would highly recommend that something be done for this program and have a diverse group of folks who are providing input. Additionally, I'll add, and I think Ms. Ogren is aware of some of the critical feedback that I'm about to provide, and much of it predates her time in her current role. The scoring system causes me great umbrage every time I look at it. It's something that was brought up during the rulemaking discussion, but was not vetted through that group, nor has it really been vetted with outside stakeholders at all. I'm not aware of any other state program that uses a negative scale, and I think just based on the conversation you guys have had today, that the scoring needs to be adjusted, and then obviously there'll be need to be some more outreach as part of that. I'm happy to be a part of those conversations, and I think you'll find others in the water user and conservation community who would similarly have a desire to make some improvements to that system. Our members are actively trying to improve their infrastructure, but also looking at new technologies and different ways to use every drop of water wisely. There's a large amount of federal funding that's available right now that's historic in levels, but it's also not likely to be around much longer. That includes federal funding through the Natural Resource Conservation Service, the PL 566 program that you might have heard of. That's where a number of our members are modernizing their systems, including the projects that you guys are potentially going to be funding and have funded thus far. The state funding is a small slice of that money and needs to match up with the federal requirements, not provide additional confusing hoops. The other source of funding is Bureau of Reclamation's Water Smart program. There's existing funding, but there's about to be a whole bunch more funding that comes out through the bipartisan infrastructure law that was passed. Some of those funding opportunities are still coming out. So I raise all that to say that there's going to be a need for more state level funding. And if this program can't work to meet those funding needs, our members will look to other sources. But in the true Oregon fashion, I think what makes the most sense is to try and use all the funding sources that are out there in a way that dovetails. And it's something we and other stakeholders have brought up as far as, well, could some of these projects be funded by other programs? If so, what are there? Where are the gaps, such as dam safety, where there should be maybe a different funding source? And I think those are things, we don't need to put all of that on you or all of that on staff, but I would encourage folks to draw upon myself and other stakeholders to provide you with that guidance. Last part I'll mention is that while there are some issues with both statutory language and the rule language, one of the things that is available, I just can't give you any specific advice on how to use it, is the commission does have discretion in these funding recommendations and potentially the ability to adjust those recommendations or look at things differently. The last part that I'll mention, that I did mention, I think at one of the virtual meetings, it all blends in to one, but there are also people who have applied to the program whose applications have been deemed to not meet the requirements. And that is a significant barrier to folks that have projects ready to go. And then that means that they then have to go to the legislature for special appropriations because of the timing not working. And that includes, for example, requiring irrigation districts who've done a voluntary ag water management conservation plan, that if they've ever done one, they're going to be held to the requirement that they always have to have one current and updated at the time of the application, which has now rejected, I think, at least 3 district projects who are all receiving federal funding who aren't going to be using this program. So a little longer than I intended, but I'm happy to help where I can and do really appreciate your leadership and ongoing attention to this important issue.
Thank you, April. Questions, anyone? That is useful feedback. Thank you. All right. We have a motion that's been moved and seconded to, let me just look at exactly what that motion would have been. Yeah, sure.
I just,
Sorry.
again, wanted to reiterate, Kim and Adair, thank you for all of your work. We definitely trust you and your decisions here. And I think we're just looking at it from a different perspective, maybe going into the future, but definitely appreciate all the time that you put into this and helping the people of Oregon. So thank you.
Thank you, Julie. And also recognizing that this has been a challenging program. You know, it's a challenging program. You guys have been working at it for years now, trying to kind of get to the right place within the statutory constraints. And so I guess I'm just saying, I understand that you've been trying to working at getting this to a better place. So why don't we vote on this motion? And the motion is that's moved and seconded to adopt the funding recommendation contained in table 2 of this report to fund 3 applications for a total award of $6,642,745. I'm just repeating the motion because it's been a while since it was made. So I'll go ahead and take roll. Commissioner Wolf?
Yes.
Commissioner Kahara?
Yes.
Commissioner Smitherman?
Yes.
Commissioner Mall?
Yes.
Commissioner Lee? Yes. Commissioner Quentz?
Yes.
Commissioner Reeves says yes, motion carries. Thanks again, Kim and Adair. Oh, you're right. We're not done yet. Sorry. Continue. I'm looking right at the page too.
Yes, Chair Reeves, thank you. We do have one more action item we would like to bring to the commission. Oops. Specifically requesting that we increase the project budget or the allocation of funding to the Fitzpatrick Conservation Project. Just as a refresher, this project was funded in December of 2021. It is a grant to Trout Unlimited and Jerry McCullough with Rocking M Cattle Company. It's a conservation, flow restoration and protection and water infrastructure project. Initially, the funding awarded was just under $530,000. This project will pipe just over 3,000 feet of an irrigation ditch, and convert 127 acres from flood irrigation to a center pivot irrigation system. And 100% of the conserved water would be protected in stream through the allocation of conserved water program. In September of this year, we received a request from the grantee to increase their grant award by $68,064. And the reason for their request is that the cost of materials has increased more than anticipated due to inflation since they applied for funding in April of 2021. And the landowner has committed to contributing an additional $22,688 in cash to meet the match requirement to get to that minimum 25% grantee contribution. Our process is to evaluate these requests as they come in through the door. We don't frequently receive requests to increase a project budget, but sometimes they occur. And in our process, we look and see, is there money available to increase the project budget? Is this grant in compliance with all of their reporting and up to date on all their permits and whatnot? And then we look at the justification for the requested increase. In this case, the grantee noted, they've tried to find ways to reduce the project costs, seeking different bids, they've done a lot of work to try to reduce and stay within the original project budget, but just with the cost of materials increase, there isn't a way to do that. And if they don't secure additional funding somewhere, they would have to scale back the project from what was originally intended and achieve fewer public benefits. In our evaluation, we have money available, and the grantee is in compliance, and we feel that this request makes sense and is justified, and we recommend that the commission grant additional funds. So more specifically, the commission has a number of alternatives to consider that are listed here on the screen. Adopt the funding recommendation contained in Table 3 of this report to increase the Fitzpatrick Conservation Project Grant Award by $68,064, adopt a modified funding recommendation, or decline to increase the grant award. And we recommend alternative 1.
Okay, commissioners have questions, comments?
So remember, about a year ago, when we directed staff to look into this question of discretion over the very item. And my memory was the deep dive they did into statutes and was that it's limited and really can't do it, needs to come back to the commission. So it's happened. Kim noted that it hasn't happened before, much if at all. Well, it's going to, because this will be precedent setting. So at that time, suggestion, let's give the staff discretion within some percentage of something. And so that's set aside. Well, this is a 13% increase over the grant request. I kind of feel like we need to, if we're going to set precedent by doing something like this, and I'm supportive of it. I'm supportive of the discretion before, but there needs to be some sort of benchmark. We need to benchmark it to the cost, the CPI or some sort of, because how are we to know that 13% really is a reflection of the market or something that's unique to their design and needs to be taken care of by their design? So I don't know, should we have a 10% threshold for something like this or not at all? I just want to point it out. I'm supportive of doing it, but I do think it's more than simply this award. This is precedent setting, and we need to give some thought, and I would encourage some discussion around how this precedent might roll out.
Commissioner, I think it might be very difficult to set a threshold given that no one has any way to control the prices on materials, and our pipe is gone in some cases from a 20% increase to over 150, and we don't know what the market will be tomorrow. So it is a very difficult thing to do.
Maybe it's a part of a broader conversation, as far as grants go in general and how we're scoring them. I'm also in support, I would say, of the increase, given what we're facing. Everyone's facing it, but I agree with Commissioner Moll that we're setting a precedent, and we will likely hear from more of our grant recipients, if we do that.
Any other comments, questions? I mean, I am in favor of this particular request. And I see the point about trying to get some, I don't know what the word is, some boundaries in place or some expectation of how to kind of demonstrate how your project has been affected vis-a-vis inflation. And I'm in the back of my mind, I'm thinking about all of the other projects that are underway, rulemaking, for example, and how, how to add to the agency's agenda a relook at this program right now. I'm anxious about it, honestly, because there's just so much other stuff that has to get done. So I'm not sure. I mean, I hear what you're saying. I don't know what to do with it.
I can speak in reference to one program with a parallel, and that is the Willamette Wildlife Mitigation Program, which is a BPA funded program through OEFW. And once an award has been made, if for any number of reasons, because of projected cost increases or budget, the applicant has the ability to come back to the administrative staff for a change in budget up to 10%. And beyond 10%, it has to go back to the TRT for review. But then you get into that. But sometimes the reverse can happen. That maybe TU in the midst of this finds that the adjoining landowner wants to participate, and all of a sudden for another 12% or 8%, you get 20% increase in impacts across all three of your scores. So it can go in both directions. So there's precedent for a 10% cap before it needs higher level of scrutiny. Nothing's going to be perfect, but I do think, one thing we hear over and over, not only from on the application side, but on the regulatory side, is people want certainty. They want certainty in our programs. And so 10%,
yeah.
You do it up to 10%, that gives you some level of certainty. And you can angle it.
Do we, I didn't remember the conversation you described. I'm not saying it didn't happen, I'm just saying I didn't remember about whether the agency could do something like this without coming back to the commission.
Oh, yeah, we gave them.
Yeah, so, and was that it was decided we couldn't delegate that to agency staff? Is that what happened? Do you guys remember this?
I do not.
Kim, this is
Joe,
something you
you're
and
the only
Becky,
person that remembers.
Kim, it's something you and Becky looked into. We directed staff to look into this, and you reported back on it.
Correct. Yes, the commission directed us to look at it. We reported back, I believe, in the director's report from the September 2022 commission meeting. And I was out on maternity leave, and I'm not recalling the details. My apologies on exactly what, but in the statute, it does say that the commission is to make awards. But I would need to relook. I apologize that I'm not recalling the details, but maybe Adair, you recall.
Yeah, Director Byler presented this on our behalf. We did submit a report that basically we talked about our existing process for doing this, which is what Kim has laid out today for this Trout Unlimited project. And we said at this time we didn't recommend changes to that. But maybe the commission wants to direct us to look at it again.
Well,
I don't recommend that. I don't recommend that we ask staff to look at this again outside of what you, Commissioner Smitherman said.
yeah.
The larger assessment is different. I do feel like with this decision on this particular application, giving people some clarity would help.
I think we agree with all of that you said about clarity and I think being preemptive in identifying what those bars are, that's intriguing about the notion that up to a point, there could just be staff discretion, and then after that, it would come back either the TRT or the commission or whatever. But I also very much appreciate the consideration that the workload that staff are under right now with the existing projects that they have. Kim's group is trying to stand up another funding program, and that is going to be very time consuming in itself. So it's just appreciated that is acknowledged.
Well, we'll put it in the parking lot for when we, yeah, I see that, for when we get to, thank you, when we get. We're able to.
It's a big parking lot.
Yeah. Commissioner Webb, do you have some comment?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Reeves. I appreciate Commissioner Mall's comment about the need to kind of benchmark this and think about the future so that we can provide some consistency. I think it's also fair and important to consider the context of, you know, the number of proposals we're reviewing today. We have one that's not going to be funded. It's not like there's a lot of proposals stacked up, and if there's available funding, I think the commission has a discretion to make a decision here with that kind of context. If we had somebody come back for cost increases and maybe we had, you know, more proposals and less funding available, we might not award them additional funding. We might just address those new requests in front of us. And I think that's all fair. I just think it's context that we need to make sure that we document. And so if questions come up in the future, we can point back to that context. Thank you.
Commissioner Lee.
Yeah, I feel very comfortable with the staff having some control over this issue. And if we don't agree with the proposal that comes to us, we have an opportunity then to make a change. So until we do a rulemaking on the results of Senate Bill 839, I don't think we can set a standard.
Okay. I think we're ready for a motion on this particular item.
May I ask a question?
Oh, yes.
Is anyone from Trout Unlimited on the call? Or the landowner?
Sorry, yeah, I can answer that question. Unfortunately, Trout Unlimited was not able to join us today. The grantee is in an all-day conference in Seattle. So she apologized, and I said I would try to answer any questions on her behalf.
If you're willing to do that, do you have any sense that if, for example, we awarded them only 10%, so could they take up another $16,000 in match?
I don't have a sense of that. I do know what I can add is they did work when they first got the contract or the bid back from their contractor. They worked with that contractor to reduce it as much as possible. They did some engineering design changes to reduce the amount that they would have to come back and ask us for. But I can't unfortunately answer if they would be able to absorb another 16,000 in match.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Is any commissioner ready to make a motion?
I would make a motion to adopt funding recommendation contained in table 3 of this report to increase the Patrick Ditch Conservation Project grant award by $68,064.
Thank you, Commissioner Wolf. Seconded by Commissioner Lee. Further discussion? Okay, let's vote. Commissioner Wolf?
Yes.
Commissioner Kahara?
Yes.
Commissioner Smitherman?
Yeah.
Commissioner Mall?
Yes.
Commissioner Lee?
Yes.
Commissioner Quinn?
Yes, thank you.
Commissioner Reed votes yes, and the motion carries. Thank you, Kim and Adair. Well done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Well, time for lunch. Do we have any logistics to talk about for the commissioners or any people who are coming on the tour?
I don't think so.
Okay. People know what's happening.
Bang again, I'll adjourn.
That's what I was waiting for. I'm thinking that at the beginning. No, I don't.
Bang and say we're adjourned.
This is a pandemic lesson, that I don't have to use the gavel.
Meg, this is my first in-person meeting in 3 years.
I'm not even chair on.
There's so much energy around this gavel.
Meeting adjourned. I will now stop the recording and the live stream.
All right. Okay. See you later, Eric, tomorrow.
Have a good tour.